And welcome to episode 10 of the Retro Critical Podcast. And yes, this is in fact episode 10. For whatever reason, the last episode I said it was episode 10, and it was in fact episode 9, so I corrected that in the show notes and in the titles. This is in fact the 10th episode of the Retro Critical Podcast. And we have a good number of themes today. No interviews. I'd like to get some more interviews going. I just haven't been able to set it up. But we're going to talk about some news and notes over the past couple of weeks. I'm going to talk about King of Fighters 14. We're going to look at the first bracket, actually all of the first round brackets, I should say, in the Retro League 1991 tournament. I'm going to talk about advertising on the internet, and then focus in on this whole YouTube disaster where they're sort of cracking down on inappropriate language and other things. We're going to talk about kind of returning to our retro roots, as it were, and creating new games. And I've got a little hardware review of some home theater audio equipment. So a pretty good episode, and before we start, I just want to thank a lot of the people who have been leaving very positive comments on the YouTube channel. They are greatly appreciated, and I've got a little request. If you're considering leaving a comment on YouTube, I would appreciate it if you left that comment on iTunes. I'm trying to get some positive reviews going on iTunes, and I always say that at the end of the podcast. Granted, my last segment maybe doesn't always get listened to, so I'll put it out here. If you want to say a few nice words about the podcast on iTunes, I think that would go a long way into sort of moving it up the ranks, as it were, of gaming podcasts. Appreciate that. But yeah, episode 10, the real episode 10 of the Retro Critical Podcast. Here we go. I just wanted to start with the PlayStation Network price increase. If you've been listening to the podcast, you know that I am no stranger to Sony bashing, and I'm not going to go too far into it. But basically, they're raising the price of a yearly PlayStation Network subscription from $49.99 to $59.99. And, of course, the obvious question is, why? What services are they adding, or what services are they improving? And to my knowledge, especially when this story came out, there was no information on that. This is seemingly a cash grab, and a pretty unfounded one on the part of Sony. Now, I have not been a PlayStation Network subscriber on a yearly basis anyway for quite some time, probably since the initial release. As you know, if you listen to the show, I don't play a lot online. I'll pick up a month here or there if there's something I feel like I want to play. But yeah, pretty surprising. This is also affecting Canada. They're going to go up to $69.99 Canadian. I'm not sure what that works out to with the exchange rate. And it's going to affect some other territories. I think Australia, of course, Australia's pricing is always crazy. They haven't announced anything for Europe, but I would be pretty pissed if this is what I play. Of course, first you have to consider Steam. And the fact that Steam is proof positive that you can have a successful online service without charging a monthly fee, and consider their user base. So they have, I think, like 120 to 125 million users. Again, not all on at the same time. That's a lot of people who are getting a lot of potential to play online games, and who probably play a ton of games online. I mean, that's just the way of things these days. So if you can have a service of 125 million, let's say, for free, of course it's not for free, you're paying for it by buying the games, but again, the games on Steam are in many cases a lot less expensive. So totally unfounded. I just don't understand why they're doing this. One of the things that I would really complain about is the fact that just the download speeds on the PlayStation Network are terrible. And I tweet out if I'm downloading something. If you follow me on Twitter, you've seen these tweets where I'm trying to download something that's 16 gigabytes, and it tells me I've got to wait 18 hours, where on Steam that's downloaded pretty much instantly. Even on a wireless connection, some other wireless computers, I can get well beyond the speeds that I get on the Sony PlayStation. So, disappointing, and it just goes back to a point that I made, I think, on the post E3 podcast. I think that was maybe episode 7. And I can't remember the exact wording that I used, but go back and listen to it. The basic point that I said was it seems like game companies are kind of moving in this direction where they're going to control the conditions and the nature and the duration of your game time. I mean, if Sony wants to charge you an extra $10 a month to play online, they're going to do it. They're going to control and monetize your access to that particular part of the gaming experience. If they feel like after a year, server's going to come offline and you're not going to get the full value for whatever game you bought, again, they control that. So they're taking what used to be a consumer right built in to the software out of your hands, and I think this is one example. And again, that's not as tightly stated as I had it in that other episode, but I think fans should, again, rebel, even if it's just for a month. Cancel it for a month or let it lapse for a month or so. I know that for the majority of gamers, online play is indistinguishable from the concept of video games, but just do it. Just send a message, and I'm pretty sure if enough people do that, Sony will either... Well, they're probably not going to change their course, but they at least may come out and make some tangible improvement to justify the price hike. Alright, King of Fighters 14. Despite my small diatribe last month about how I was really down on buying new games, and that is true for the most part, but I just couldn't resist King of Fighters 14. I've been looking forward to it for quite some time. And this game is an anomaly, especially if you consider what we talked about on the last podcast. And the reason why it's so strange is that King of Fighters 14 is merely a good game. It's not spectacular. It's certainly not the best in the series, but it's not disappointing in any way. And it's just so odd to have a game like that. Yeah, it's not great. It's not a revelatory experience, but it's also not really bad in any meaningful way. I mean, there are a couple issues that we'll talk about, but yeah, so it's a surprise. Now, it's been getting a lot of slack for its visual style and for the fact that, in the opinions of many reviewers, the switch to 3D was not successful, and I don't know how I feel about that. To me, it looks okay. I think the backgrounds are certainly a lot better in terms of the 3D art that's used in them. The character models are a little basic. Someone said that they look like PS3 graphics. One of the reviews claimed that they looked like they were made by someone just coming out of programming school and just learning how to use the 3D modeling programs. I think that's a little harsh. I think they're bright, colorful, and fluid, and I think they're a close enough approximation to the sprites where you're not saying, oh, wait, who is that character? You know, they don't look so different, in my opinion anyway, that you feel somehow shortchanged. But you have to understand, King of Fighters 13 was one of the most gorgeous sprite-based games of all time, I think. It was just one of the true high points of the King of Fighters series. Now, some people are going to argue that 98 was, or 2002 was, and as I mentioned, I love 98. I actually think King of Fighters 9 on the Japanese PlayStation 2 here would be a close second. But anyway, yeah, this is not living up to that classic style, but it's emulating it in an acceptable way. And then you consider the gameplay, and I think the play mechanics, just before we get into the systems and things like that, I just think that the responsiveness and the tightness of gameplay, especially when pulling off combos, is as good as it's ever been. And all of the characters, and I'm not a King of Fighters expert. Street Fighter was always my game, but having played it on and off since basically 94, in the early days of the arcades, and then collecting it for the home systems and the compilation discs and stuff like that, the characters to me are easy pick up and play. You know, Terry Bogard feels like he always did, but I nonetheless feel like I can pull off more combos more quickly. Now, maybe that's just a reflection of the fact that I'm using the Vulix arcade stick. I don't know, but I think there have been some control enhancements, and then of course you've got a lot of the different systems, I guess some of which are not going over that well. There's just basically a button mash, quick combo system to get a combo started. There's kind of like I don't know what the terminology is, I can't remember, but basically like a combo break type of mechanic that I guess newer players can use to survive. Then, of course, there's the different meters that you can use and learning, all the special moves and how the meter fills based on which characters you're playing or which characters are more meter dependent. Add to that the fact that there are 50 characters, I think 6 or 7 of whom are new. And so not only do you have to review, at least, if you're familiar with some of these characters, kind of review their moves, but then maybe learn some new moves, learn some new combos, and then take that online. I think probably there's going to be a lot of depth for the expert player. I am not the expert player, but what I like is that I can play through the arcade mode, and it does have it's called a story mode. I guess this would be a downside to the game. The story mode is bare bones. I mean, it's basically the old school arcade mode where, you have kind of like the players talking to each other, the little dialogue interludes before or during fights based on the combinations of characters you've chosen and the combination against which you're fighting. There are some cinematics, but it's all kind of thin and nonsensical. But it doesn't need to be a fleshed out story. It is an arcade mode, and you can go and drill the difficulty up or down and just basically experiment and learn the characters. And I've been having a ball with that. That's what I like to do in fighting games. And there's a pretty good tutorial. It has obviously the lab mode where you can see all your button inputs, practice all of the move sets and stuff like that. And of course, I'm not going to talk about the online. I think the online, the impressions that I get are that the servers, the kind of stability of the online game is fine if you find another player with a ping equal to your own. But if one has a kind of a lesser connection, it gets really bad. Again, I don't label that as a negative for me. It might be. And of course, nowadays it takes them a while to get the servers up and running. I take it from some people that I follow that the online is nowhere near as bad as Street Fighter V when that came out. So I'm trying to think of other things that are in there. I mean, there's kind of a gallery, stuff you can unlock, and costumes and whatnot. Haven't seen any DLC just yet. But, I mean, I think people will say, oh, this is kind of bare bones as a fighter. But I think it's bare bones in a good way. It's a traditional fighting game. And where they went all out was to give you all of those characters and a fighting system that is something you could dump a lot of hours into. And that's exactly what fighting games should do. And I hate to say it, but I think King of Fighters, I always thought that the characters animated so well and each character was so unique that I didn't really need or want a backstory. I just wanted to kind of enjoy the artwork. And of course, certainly a little bit of that is diminished by the move to 3D. But I would say it's not by an extreme amount. I think it's tolerable. I would love to have more sprite-based games. I would love to have that classic Neo Geo style. It isn't there, but the fighting is solid. And I think the other, I guess, aspect of it is I always had the sense with the Neo Geo fighters back in the day that what I was getting, even if it was kind of derivative in its play mechanics, I felt like there was a certain degree of mastery there. There was artistic mastery. There was, even though it was kind of quote-unquote mimicking Street Fighter, I thought it gave you a depth of gameplay that Street Fighter didn't always have, depending on what release you played in the arcade and what version of Street Fighter was out. So I don't think this game has that mastery. It doesn't have that kind of Neo Geo swagger where, hey, this is an elite game, we know it's terrific, we know it's flawless, have at it. But I don't think that's sadly, it's not a reasonable expectation these days. But what it does give you is, again, it's a ton of content, it's a good system, and then hopefully what we can see, I don't know that it needs a yearly release, but hopefully they have an engine in place where this is not something we're going to have to wait another 3 or 4 years to play, as was the case with King of Fighters 13. Hopefully we'll get maybe 2018, we'll get another one with a little bit better art style and stuff like that. So I would give this kind of a cautious recommendation. Obviously, if you've grown up with the series and you've appreciated the series, I would still say go for it. Just know that you're not going to get the gorgeous 2D sprite work that SNK was known for. But you're still going to get, I think, a game that will be fun and nostalgic and challenging all at the same time. I think, if you're a serious fighting game fan, I suspect that they're buying this just because it's in their genre. And as far as casual players go, and again, I don't consider myself a true casual. I consider myself kind of a relaxed player, a relaxed, nostalgic player. But I guess if you're in a situation, maybe you're younger or whatever, and you want to know, do I spend $60 on this versus Street Fighter V versus some of the other fighting games out there, and you're hoping that this kind of has the same level of sophistication in all aspects of its presentation, you might be a little disappointed. But again, I think it's a good game, and I'm happy to say that. I'm happy to say that I bought a game for the PlayStation 4, and it's good, and I don't regret it. And I haven't said that in a long time. The only games I could really say it about were the Konami soccer games, shockingly, and a couple of other titles that, early titles, like the Killzone, I thought was okay, and the early NBA 2K14 game was actually pretty good. But yeah, so I feel like cautiously optimistic because you've got this game, it's good. Supposedly there's going to be a versus CPU mode coming out for Street Fighter V. Now, that could just be, hey, here's one match, best 2 out of 3 match against an opponent, and then we're going to send you back to the main menu. I think that's probably where Capcom is at as far as delivering content, but who knows? If it's a true traditional arcade mode, then I'll have 2 very, very solid fighters to play on my PlayStation 4. Tekken 7's coming out, so I'm kind of like guarded, will I be able to use the system now a little bit more? Nonetheless, I think King of Fighters 14 is going to keep me sort of pleasantly occupied for a few months. For this month's hardware update, I'm going to be reviewing a subwoofer and then giving you some thoughts about home theater in gaming and where you can really maximize your budget if you're setting up a home theater with gaming in mind. So the product I'm going to talk about is the SVS PB1000. And this is a subwoofer from a direct order company. They specialize in subwoofers primarily. They also have some other speakers, and just a little bit about my history with subwoofers. You started off with this is back 10 or 15 years ago, with one of those home theater in a box things. They were pretty ubiquitous back then. And it was okay. It was better than what I was coming from. I hooked it up to my Sony Trinitron television and thought, wow, now I have a home theater. And over the years, I've moved on to different receivers, different speakers, and things like that. But shortly after I purchased that, I purchased this initial home theater in a box. It was a Sony. The sub was kind of weak, so I purchased a Sony subwoofer, and I can't remember the exact part number. It was an 8-inch sub, so obviously very small. Something like AWG S125, maybe, something like that. And as I upgraded the receiver, the speakers, throughout all these years, I never really moved away from that subwoofer. I had demoed a couple at home, from big box stores and stuff like that, and they never really gave me anything significantly better than that Sony subwoofer. I mean, in some cases they were close, some were really boomy. The Sony kind of had a nice mix, it could get really loud, but it also had some subtlety to it. So over the years, and I've talked about this on the channel, I've upgraded speakers. I did a video maybe 2 years ago now on the Wharfdale Diamond 10.1 bookshelf speakers, which really had a good reputation, and I basically confirmed that and said that they're actually really good with gaming as well. I picked up the matching center channel speaker, and I just felt like it was time to find a really good sub. So I get this PB1000, and this thing is a monster. I mean, this is a $500 sub, so what does that mean? For those who are really home theater buffs, that's nothing. That is the cheapest, lowest level sub from a direct-to-customer boutique kind of a vendor. But of course, probably middle of the range to top of the range that, compared to something you'd pick up at a Best Buy. So I get this thing home, again, huge. It's, I want to say almost the size of a mini fridge. That's how big this thing is. It's well designed. I mean, it doesn't look too crazy, but it is huge and it is heavy. So what does that buy you? What does that size buy you? What does that price level buy you at a boutique vendor? What's the difference? Well, shockingly, for as big as it is, it doesn't really smash the walls in with the bass beat type of thing, which for me is okay. I kind of felt like with the correct settings, of course you can crank the thing all the way up, you can change the signal going to the subwoofer, you can amplify the LFE frequencies in your receiver and stuff like that, and you can get it to be that way. But I mean, I never, you don't want a subwoofer, at least I don't, for earth-shattering, booming sound. And I think that when you get into kind of the higher levels of, of subwoofers, that's not what they're advertising. What they're selling is a very flat, consistent, rich sound that blends well with your speakers. If you're familiar with home theater, you know that you want at least your fronts and your centers to be of the same manufacturer, same line, so they're sonically matched. But you don't have to do that with a sub. The key thing with a sub is getting quality and then room placement. And we'll get to that in a bit. So this thing, as far as for my listening, and it's mostly movies and video games, I'm not a huge music guy, but I did test it out with some music. It just blends perfectly with those speakers. And it's, I'm saying like a tight, flat response. So it's never, I guess the best way to describe that, it's never really overpowering the speakers. If anything, it sounds like the speakers are enhanced, that the bass is actually flowing through the speakers, as opposed to coming from this massive unit that's sitting in the corner. Now, with movies, what this thing does, and this is the real difference, is, well, I guess I should say, what did the Sony sound like before I get on to this? The Sony was boomy. It sounded like there was something pumping bass in the corner, as opposed to just this flat, kind of encompassing sound, a bass line that just sort of rolls out with whatever it is you're listening to. So, anyway, with movies, I said this doesn't get boomy, but what I noticed with movies is that this does something that the Sony definitely didn't do, and it creates feel. So when the Sony was booming, it would create like a rattle. You could hear it in the walls and stuff like that. I have it right next to a mantle with, I don't know, some glass candle holders on it, and those things would be rumbling and rattling at certain points in a movie. So you can, of course, if you put your hand on the wall, you'd feel that. But what you get with this new subwoofer is, on occasion, let's take an approaching spaceship or an approaching storm or something like that, or explosions. You'll actually feel a rumbling or a vibration in the floor, in your seat, before it becomes audible, before it moves into that audible range. And I think that's a sign of a good sub. So you can't hear it. It's not like a rap beat or something where you can hear it pounding, but you're feeling it before it comes into the audible spectrum. And there are some subs. I mean, if you spend $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 on a sub, you'll get one that can do this for a huge room. In my case, this is a moderately sized rooms, and I'm getting this occasionally. I mean, there are some subs that can do this all the time, but it is an improvement. Still, however, I find it's just like when I was testing it out, I kind of felt I'd like to get it, but I'd like to see what this thing can do, and I never felt like I could push it to irresponsible levels. Like I said, that's not really my goal with it, but I kind of wanted to try it, and I don't think this particular thing would be capable of that. Now, a couple of other home theater considerations building on this point. For all the different equipment that I've had, and the constant sort of upgrade in price points from the absolute cheapest to, decent mid-range stuff from the Best Buy, and now to kind of the lowest level of the boutique, and I don't see myself going far beyond that at this point, I can say that it's never totally fulfilling, in the sense that as much as I like those Wharfdale speakers, and I do like them, I've never reached a point where I just turn this thing on and I'm blown away with every source. I think I've gotten close with this setup. I think this setup is, for the current place that I'm in, and for the current space, it's as good as I'm going to get. But I've never been completely overwhelmed. And maybe that's just because I've kind of grown up with it, so it's not, loudness that impresses me, loudness with distortion. It's not like, if you remember back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when you had those boom boxes that again could rattle the house, but you weren't getting clean sound out of them in a lot of cases. Maybe it's just more refined listening, but I think it's a key point to make to people is that when you are buying home theater stuff, and especially if you have a chunk of change that you're putting towards this, don't just assume that you can spend money and you're going to get that immediate improvement. There's so many other aspects to home theater, like speaker placement. So you talk about speaker placement, you want to read up on that, particularly your fronts. I mean, with the subwoofer, technically what you're supposed to do, and I didn't do this because I only really in this room had one spot to put it in, but you're supposed to, you get an extension cord you buy off of Monoprice, like a 25-foot sub cable, and you put the subwoofer, technically it's supposed to be right at ear level. You can just rest it on the couch, and you try out a whole bunch of different sources, and you crawl around the room. You physically crawl, you sort of put your ear to the ground, and wherever in the room you feel the sub sounds best is ultimately where you place it. It doesn't matter where it is. Of course, if it's in the center of the floor, or if it's a place where you just can't put it, it's not going to work out. But that's technically what you're supposed to do. So you have the issue of speaker placement. You have the issue with room acoustics. And this is something that's going to be hard for people to test because really we're tied to our spaces for the most part, unless you have a huge house. Then you can say, oh, am I going to, is this room going to be my home theater or that room? If you don't have that luxury, you're tied to a room and you have to deal with its acoustical properties. And I never really put much thought into that. I always thought it was overstated. But with this subwoofer, I found that from where I sit, again, I don't have a lot of room to play with, but from where I sit, I was like, this thing's okay. not bad. I was like, oh, $500, maybe it should be better. And then I moved to kind of like the next, I have these like cinema seats, they were called, but it's basically a couch with a partition and cup holders, and then each seat reclines. So I moved to the next seat, and I was like, holy crap, this sounds great. And I moved to, I have against another wall, kind of like another couch for guests. And I sat there, I was like, wow, this sounds great. So just that little move off access from my seat made a huge improvement. And again, there's nothing really I can do. I just have that one place to put it. I also have a very bad room for sound. I've determined this just by trial and error. So I have pretty tall ceilings. I'm not sure how tall they are, maybe 9-10 foot ceilings, and then kind of like parts of them are skylights, so I don't know how far it is up to the skylight, and not really uniform walls. It's kind of like, I would say maybe one really solid wall, then kind of like a curved half wall, and then an open sort of back of the room that kind of leads into another room and a hallway. And I just found that no matter what I upgraded to, that configuration for the sound is terrible. It's just, there's very few reflection points. I should say that another wall is kind of like a big floor-to-ceiling glass sliding doors looking out to a balcony, so that's not great for sound, and that kind of limits where I can place things. So this is not a good room, and there's only so far you're going to get if you have that kind of space constraint. Now, I tried putting those Wharfdales in the game room just to test them out, and they sounded even better in here. And of course, I didn't have the sub, and I had an old receiver. So it's really room dependent. So I don't think that you have to spend a lot of money to, if you spend a lot of money, you'll just upgrade the sound exponentially. In some cases, it's not possible. So I think the key, especially for gaming, because I think with gaming, obviously the sound is such an important part, and if you can wire up a 5.1 or 7.1 system, which I can't do in my current house. In a previous house, I did have the 5.1 system, even though it was horrendously cheap. It does add to games, and adds a dimension to games that I really do think you're missing if you're just playing them on television. So I think there's a real reason to go out and get into home theater. So I don't want to discourage you from doing that. I just think that you have to be very selective with the equipment and how you spend your money, assuming money is a finite resource for you. So a couple tips that I've learned over the years. Tip number one is going to be build over time. Don't go out and, even if you have $5,000 to spare, please don't go out and spend that $5,000 on speaker equipment right away and home theater equipment. I'm assuming, we all have televisions, we all have Blu-ray players already, so it's not like you have to invest that. I'm talking about pure home theater. Go out and get a really good receiver. I'm not talking thousands of dollars. I'm just look at the receivers, look at the ratings online. There are receivers, and I've made this mistake, and I'm suffering with this mistake right now. Receivers are products that have no standard way of measuring their output. So some speaker or some receiver companies will tell you that, it's 140 watts per channel. And then you look at, this is the situation that I'm in, and you look at it, it's 140 watts, one channel driven at 6 ohms, which is not a real world condition. So I was just a Pioneer nut. I got into this Pioneer craze and got all of this Pioneer equipment. And it's so stupid. This thing was on sale. It was like a $700 AV receiver, and it was marked down to, I don't know, $359 or $399 or something like that. And I was like, oh man, Pioneer, top, of the consumer range, I'm going to get it. And you know what? It's not bad. and it sounds good, but it didn't quite work out from the power category. So you want that power, and a quick way of doing it is just look at the weight. You know, if your $1,000 receiver is like 20 pounds or 15 pounds, probably not a whole lot of high-level electronics in there. So just look at the ratings online. There's a Denon. Some people are like, oh, Denon, it's only 70 watts per channel, but it outperforms things that are like 80, 90 watts per channel. You also want to look at the total harmonic distortion rating. Make sure that's 1%. And see what the return policy is depending on where you buy it. Even if you're not going to hook up a 7.1, 7.2 system, at least you have that option. And you have some good electronics there. So that's one thing. The other thing to consider about receivers, and again, this is a mistake that I've made, make sure that it has something called an amp pre-out. And what that's going to let you do, if you find that you really get into audio and you really want to drive certain speakers as well as you possibly can, you can kind of route the signal to an amplifier and then amplify the sound of one or more channels on your system. Of course, the amplifiers are themselves expensive, but when I had these Wharfdales, I kind of realized that I was receiver limited in what they can do, and someone said, oh, we'll just preamp it out to an amplifier and power them through the amplifier, and they'll be so much better. Well, I can't do that. And I'm not quite at the point where I want to upgrade the receiver just yet, because I got it maybe a year and a half ago. So that's point number one. Point number two is, once you do that, start off with cheap speakers. Go on to eBay, just pick some cheap stuff up and test out placement, test out room acoustics, and see what it sounds like, and see if are there any dead spots in the room. And if you find that it sounds good, if you nail down your placement, then go out and get the expensive speakers. The next point leading off of that is, I would advise you to go with one of these boutique kind of speaker companies. Now, when I say boutique, I just mean companies focused on audio and selling direct to customers, to kind of like a limited network. If it's sold in a Best Buy, at least on the floor and not in the Magnolia store, I would just avoid it, especially if you're going for higher level stuff. Like if you have a budget, if you're spending $300-$400 on a pair of speakers, a pair of fronts, don't spend that at a Best Buy. Go to someplace like Music Direct, go to SVS, RBH, there's a number of them, ELAC or something, any one you can find. But I kind of like Music Direct. They've got a 60-day return policy, and I had to use it actually on my first pair of Wharfdales. So go there, and you'll get better service. The SVS people, I think I'm trying to remember what the warranty is. I think it's like a 2-year warranty on the amp, on the subwoofer, 5-year warranty on the craftsmanship, and a 60-day, no questions asked, free shipping return policy as an audition period. So you're not going to get that at a Best Buy. And if you're spending that kind of money, you want to test it out in the room and not have any hassles. So, and I think you're going to get better quality simply because that's all these companies do. Some of these companies, they just do front speakers. Some of these companies just do subwoofers. Or they only have 1 or 2 lines. So you have to be satisfied, and you typically get better specs for your money. Now, if you find yourself in a situation where speaker placement is an issue, I cannot do, as I said, 5.1 surround because I have no walls behind me and actually no walls to the side of me that would allow for the proper placement of the rear channels. If you find yourself in that position, you may want to go for towers. Now, towers are somewhat controversial in the sense that they're very big. And if you read, there's a website called Audioholics. They actually rate things according to wife acceptance factor, spouse acceptance factor. And there are some massive, massive towers. So that's going to be an issue. Your people you live with are going to have to accept it. But assuming you get past that, you may find that 2 really high-powered speakers means that you don't really need a rear channel. You may not need a center channel, and you don't need a subwoofer, because the reason why you have a tower is because they have the ability to play those low tones. And a friend of mine just moved into a new place, and he's not into home theater, but the previous owners left these towers, and they were fairly old, but they were hooked up to a good, pretty powerful receiver that the old owners also left. And you know what? They sounded very, very good. And again, they're not the best by any means. So you may find you'll get more mileage out of going with towers. And again, if you look on I don't have any relationship with Music Direct, but they have a selection of those kind of higher end speaker towers. And sometimes you can get them discounted if they're floor models, which I wouldn't necessarily hesitate buying floor models from like a boutique shop, because it means they're broken in with the right kind of music in a responsible setting. It's not like the PC Richards where the kids go in and just blast something and blow out the tweeters or something like that. So that's an option to save you some money. What would my other? I think that pretty much covers it. But what I would encourage you to do is do the research and don't shy away from it. I think people, because home theater is surprisingly complicated. It's, I think, a problem that the industry has. There's so much choice, and there's so much variance in the physical space into which this equipment is being installed that you really have to drill down and figure out what's right for you, what's right for your budget. And it's not always going to be the most expensive thing. Before I sign off on this segment here, I talked about what I did in the game room, and I said I had this old Pioneer receiver, and I hooked it up to 2 Polk Audio Monitor 40s. So these are pretty big bookshelf speakers, and no subwoofer, nothing. And you know what? For a retro gaming setup, beautiful, awesome, huge, terrific sound. Those things are like $120, I think, on Newegg around Christmas time. It's the same model they've been making since the 70s, I think. So something like that, if you've got a small room and you want front speakers, go with that, or at least audition that. But it can really add to the experience. I mean, what's the baseline? The baseline is the crappy speakers you have in your television. So on the one hand, anything is an improvement over that, but you can really waste a lot of money if you kind of go in blind. So I think it is for gaming, it is a massive upgrade. And to just bring it back to the subwoofer, a good, powerful subwoofer in gaming is wonderful. Even something like King of Fighters 14, and in the character select screen in the arcade mode, was a character select. No, it's the victory screen after you've won the match, and it just has this really kind of low bass rumble that this subwoofer brings out, and you can feel it in the chair. It's so cool. Or just the footsteps of the heavier characters on the screen. It really does add to the experience. So again, home theater, don't shy away from it, embrace it, and if you're already into it, upgrade intelligently over time, and do it with the right vendors, and I think you will definitely add to your gaming experience. the things that I've always wanted to talk about here on the podcast is the role that advertising plays in the kind of quote-unquote content that we consume. And this is an issue that obviously goes beyond retro gaming, but of course it affects us in the hobby and following the community. So it's a broader point, but I think related to how we get our information about video games. Now, just to put my cards on the table, and I've said this before, but I'll lay it out here again, I do monetize some of my videos. If a video has kind of enough, it's just purely original content, whether it's commentary or a skit or something like that, I'll monetize it. If it has gameplay or music, obviously I won't. And I never use the question of making money on a video as a means of, do I make it or not? I simply make the content that I want to make, and I put it out there, and if it can be monetized, I do, simply because it's illogical not to. Maybe I can make a few pennies here or there, but again, it doesn't guide what I create. And I've always said that if you find advertising annoying, if you're out there watching one of my videos and you see, I'm getting ads that have no bearing on my life and that are irritating, put on ad block. It doesn't bother me. I'm not doing this to make a living. I'm doing this as a hobby. I'm doing it to communicate about a medium that I've been following my whole life. So to me, if I can make something, great. If not, that's fine. And I've made about, not really sure what the exact number is now, but at a certain point in January or so, after about 3 years, I made $100, and I took a check from YouTube, and I just threw that money into an investment. So that's where I stand financially on YouTube. Now, as far as a podcast goes, it is completely unmonetized. It is completely self-funded. I have, on occasion, pulled out a segment here or there and uploaded it as a separate video and monetized it, although I haven't done that in a while. But this is just a personal project that I enjoy doing, and I really don't want to monetize because I think the musical interludes and stuff just make it better. And, of course, if I were to monetize the videos, I couldn't have those. So that's where I am. Now, the question of advertising. A lot of creators here on YouTube, and I'm going to get to this idea of content creators in a little bit, but for now I'm going to use that vocabulary just for sake of ease. They come out and they'll do videos as to why they monetize, of course, and why we should not block their ads. And the argument that they ultimately come up with is, well, you're getting this for free, and we're putting all of this time and effort and investment into creating this free content, so the least you could do is watch our videos without ad blocker. They all have variations on that, but that's the basic argument. Some of them then direct you to a Patreon or a PayPal donation page to generate a little bit more income. Now, I'm going to take issue with the idea that this content that we're consuming is free. Yes, we are not paying for it directly, but with money. But I would contest that it's actually free. So, why is it not free? Well, I think there are a couple broad points that kind of elucidate why it's not free. First of all, for a lot of these online platforms, whether it's YouTube or Twitter, stuff like that, the data that we generate just by being users is extremely valuable to the platform owner. And this data is, in all likelihood, and of course I don't know the specifics of Google versus Facebook versus Twitter, but I think it's safe to say that in some form or fashion, this data is, whether in aggregate or whether, disaggregated in some way that's useful to a third party, it is sold off. So we're actually providing a commodity, or kind of digital raw material to these companies and kind of giving it to them free of charge, and they are making money off of it. Secondly, I think without our input, without monitoring our behaviors, things like a search algorithm, they don't work as well, right? You need us as users of a platform to further refine these technologies, to further refine these services. Now, in some cases, we benefit from it. Obviously, with Google search, it's particularly useful in and of itself. Some people will argue that the results are so specifically tailored to our interests and preferences that it ceases to be reliable, objective information. I'm not going to touch on that, but basically we're giving up a part of ourselves to these platforms to either make them work better or to increase their profitability. Now, this is not something that the content creators obviously receive a cut of. Although you might make the argument that the fact that they have a free platform to which they can upload their material is paid for by the fact that we are all creating this raw material for Google. But they're not getting a monetary cut of the action. Obviously, with YouTube Red, some of that is changing, but I haven't really paid attention to exactly how the payouts work, because in my case, I'll see a video and, my Red revenue is 4 cents, so it's not worth paying attention to for me. So that's number one. Now, number two, as far as why this really isn't free, is that we are paying for this content with our lives. Now, that's a bold point, but hear me out here. I would almost call it psychotic level to which content is monetized makes it such that our entire interactions in the digital space are kind of buffered by thousands of advertisements. And this has actually in some cases a financial cost, but it has a life cost to it. So the basic sort of financial cost is that, and people have pointed this out before, look, if you're on a metered data plan of any kind and you're surfing the internet, all of these ads, all of these pre-roll videos are taking up your data, so you're actually, in a sense, paying to see them. But the broader point is, think about a pre-roll ad, whether it's 15 seconds or 30 seconds. Think about the ads that you have to look at to click onto some websites, all the different kind of soft paywalls that you encounter, to say nothing of the banners and pop-ups and things like that still exist. If you watch, take an arbitrary number, if you watch 1,000 pre-roll ads a year, that is your life. That is 15 measurable seconds of your life where you're forced to direct your attention to something you don't really care about. So say that you watch, let's say, 8 YouTube videos a day. I would say that's probably where I fall. I don't know if that's a lot or a little, but let's say you watch 8 monetized videos a day with, and each have kind of a 15-second pre-roll ad. I know that some have a 30-second pre-roll ad. I know that some have the skippable ads. I get it, but for argument's sake, for example's sake, so you watch 8 monetized videos per day with the unskippable 15-second pre-roll ads. That works out to about, 2 minutes of your attention captured, taken away from what you cared to direct it to per day, times 365 days a year. I mean, you're looking at about over 12 hours, I guess, of your life, about a little more than 12 hours of your life, that have been stolen from you, that you have not been able to control your own attention. You've been forced to watch something, to look at something about which you have no interest. And that's significant. And this is just YouTube. This is to say nothing of other online video platforms or television or radio. So I think even if in the course of a day maybe you don't see 8 monetized videos, I don't know. Again, this is just based on my own usage. I'm sure people are having their attention consumed at a shocking rate. I mean, if you look at it over the course of your life. So, I mean, even if, you got those 12 hours a year, for 10 years, that's 120 hours of your life. It's shocking. I mean, when you add this up, and again, just in this YouTube example, not to say all of this other stuff. So that is, your life is a finite resource. It doesn't seem like it when you're only paying attention to something for 15 seconds. But think of all the things you could do with that time if you weren't forced to watch advertisement. And I don't think there's any getting around it. You might say it's an extreme example. You may say that the assumption that I gave that you're watching 8 monetized videos a day is wrong. Whatever the case is, maybe it doesn't average out to 15 seconds. Maybe you get more skippable ads than not, so this is not an issue. Or to say nothing of kind of shutting off the device or putting it on mute and turning it over so you're not seeing it. But even in that case, you're still not doing what you want with your time. Your time is still being controlled by a third party. So whatever calculation that you want to make, this is still time that is being stolen from you. It is time, it is the finite resource of your life being given up to watch this content. And of course, you come to the question of, well, is it really worth that? Do I really want to wait 15 or 30 seconds? And I would say my answer is always no. I don't care. Like, for example, if my girlfriend sends me something, oh, you got to watch this cute video of a cat chasing a deer or something, and it's, I got to wait 30 seconds to see it. I don't care about it. I won't watch it. So that is problematic. And over the course, think about this. If you're listening to this, I would guess that you're between 25 and 35, maybe a little bit older than that. This kind of advertising approach has been around in full force for 7-8 years or so. I think it's fair to say that we've got hopefully more than 30 or 40 years of this. It's a lot, and I really think there needs to be a different model. I don't think that advertisers, I don't think that content creators can hide behind the idea that, it's a minuscule amount of your time compared to what we spend on production costs. And I don't think the answer is ad blocker. And I believe probably in 5 years that'll be completely defeated. Whether it's like Forbes or something that sees it and blocks access to the site, or they just figure out a way to come out and disable it totally, or they come up with some new advertising technology that circumvents it. I think it's fair to say that ad blocker will not be around forever. So what is the solution? I don't think it's an easy solution. I think it requires concessions on both sides, on the consumers and the producers. I think the case of the producers, they're going to have to figure out just a different way to advertise things, a less intrusive, less irritating way to come up with advertisements. And the example that I always give here is soccer. So having lived in Europe, obviously, soccer is an incredibly profitable sport, incredibly popular sport. And if you look at the earnings of the big leagues, whether it's English Premier League, Bundesliga, Serie A, La Liga in Spain, they all pull in a couple $1 billion a year. With the English Premier League, maybe about $10 billion. I haven't seen the updated results on that, but like the Bundesliga and La Liga and Serie A, they're between $1 and $3 billion. It's a pretty nice business to have. You as a league are making $3 billion, let's say in the case of the Bundesliga, and of course you pay that out to teams and stuff like that. I don't know what the profit sharing is, but it's a good business. The NFL, I think last I checked, makes $15 billion a year, a nonprofit organization, by the way. And because of those insane television rights, and of course, why are the television rights insane? Well, they capture a huge audience, and they know that it's one of the sure ways that they can, again, steal massive blocks of your attention to advertise to you. So the concession, I think, is to say, look, the sport is important, the sport is popular, so let's monetize it like we monetize soccer. Put the logos on the jerseys, on the helmets if you need to, monetize the field, monetize the graphics, but allow us to enjoy football at a natural pace. So, again, that's a concession, I think, on the part of the fans, because we have this belief in the United States that, it's somehow impure to put logos on team jerseys. Like, who wants to see a Mercedes logo on the Yankees jersey? Well, you know what? Maybe it's time we do it. Because I would honestly rather watch a game start to finish with very few commercial interruptions. And I'll have to deal with some extra graphics on the screen. The fact that my favorite football team, maybe the Steelers aren't my favorite football team, but I'm just using this example. They've got their logo, which I think is a steel industry logo to begin with, and then a blank black space on the other side of their helmet. Well, maybe on the other side of their helmet, they've got Jeep. Maybe they sign a big contract with Jeep. And I'm sure companies would sign up to be part of that team's uniform. And I think actually we could integrate the branding of the uniforms and the helmets a lot better than they do in Europe. So that's one way of doing it. Now, I think that's reasonable. Maybe you only run commercials at the end of each quarter, for example. That's a concession. The NFL would probably make less money, at least initially, and we would have to get over our, distaste for the branding of jerseys. Now, I think in the case of YouTube and online content, it's a little different. I think what the concession that we as consumers have to make is that we're going to have to start paying a modest subscription fee to remove this advertising completely. And it may not be a choice. It may be that, hey, for YouTube, now, I guess YouTube Red is a bad example because I guess there are shows or something that I can watch, like Netflix, and I have zero interest in seeing. I think there's like PewDiePie hunting ghosts or something. I would rather watch paint dry, to be honest with you. But maybe YouTube has to cost, $50 a year. That if we pay, we want to watch and enjoy YouTube commercial free, every YouTube user has to pay $50 a year. It's not outrageous. It's not an outrageous monthly sum to come up with. And not everything can be $9.99. Not everything can hit the Netflix price point. I would suggest that the content on YouTube is not, and I hate to insult people out there, but it's just not good enough to warrant, from a production standpoint, from a quality variety standpoint, and I'm going to include myself in there. Look, take a show like a slickly produced show like GameSack. They deserve a they deserve compensation for that level of quality that they put in, whereas I, with my audio commentaries, don't deserve the same level of quality. That's just the reality of YouTube. So if everything was as well produced as GameSack, yeah, then maybe it's worth $9.99 a month. But, I can watch a GameSack episode, and I guess my viewing habits aren't typical, but I can watch excerpts of a lecture recorded in 240p just on in the background as I do something around the house. That to me is not worth $9.99, but it's worth under $5 a month, certainly. It's worth $50 a year, and I think it's a reasonable concession. I think on the other hand, that the YouTube as a platform and the content creators may have to deal with less of a cut. It may not be as profitable. And I know it's almost a sin in this country to talk about giving up profits, but I like to look at things from a little bit different perspective. We have this wonderful resource called the internet. We have at our fingertips a tremendous amount of information, tremendous ability to learn about a variety of topics. And if every step you take is monetized, you eventually go crazy. You don't want to access the richness that there is to access, especially if you think about where this could go. What if for every 5 minutes of viewing, you have to watch one 30-second built-in ad? Think about, again, that sounds crazy, but is it really that far off? That if I'm watching a 15-minute video, I'm going to have to watch 3 of these things? It's pretty scary where that can go. And what would that do to me as a viewer? I would probably stop consuming as much YouTube as I can consume. So when you reach those levels of absurdity, and I think we're getting there because we're a country that doesn't really produce anything of or much of tangible and intellectual value. We have this idea of content. Content can be anything. Content is a commodity. It's a raw material. And we just throw it out there and trade it against the commodity of attention. And I think it cheapens a lot of the material that we consume. I use the term content creator, and I use the term content simply because it's just become part of the vernacular, but I kind of disagree with it. I don't see what I do as producing a stream of content material that I can then monetize. I actually see myself as being a sort of an enthusiast and an analyst about this medium that I love. And the hope is that I reach some people out there who, at the very least, enjoy listening to it, even if they vehemently disagree with me. I think an example of this is, an example of why content is bad, is you have so many content, again, I hate to use content, you have so many people out there on YouTube who worry. They worry about, I don't want to go long. Well, what's wrong with long-form content? What's wrong with paying attention for longer than 5 minutes? What's wrong with a video that doesn't rely on 6 million jump cuts from phrase to phrase? As we have this idea that for content to be valuable, it has to conform to a standard that exists out there that is absolutely absurd. I think that's why the typical level of sophistication, at least on an intellectual standpoint, of a lot of YouTube has dropped significantly over the years. So this is I just kind of hate that idea, and turning YouTube into this commodity exchange, I think has really hurt it, as well as a ton of other stuff out there. And I think one of the kind of ironic things that has happened is we've shifted away from discrete genres of writing and videos into this one commodity that is content. is that the value of that content consistently drops for the producers, for the creators. I mean, there's so many people out there on YouTube creating content, and yet the payoff, the result for a life, if you're really looking at it from a cost benefit analysis, is that you're not making a ton of money. It's very hard to establish yourself. It's very hard to trade whatever it is you're doing against this commodity of attention. It's the same thing with, take journalism, for example. I mean, if you follow what's going on in the newspaper business, very few newspaper outlets, very few reporters can actually do solid investigative journalism because the cost of actually creating and generating and finding this information just becomes not worth it for the clicks that you get. It's very easy to run clickbait. It's easier to start like a parasite news organization like the Huffington Post or the TYT channel on YouTube, where they just cherry pick stories from other sources and react to it. It's just, that's much more profitable than generating real information. So as news outlets close, as we keep on creating this content that conforms to the standards of what is profitable, the information value goes down, as does our share of any profits. I mean, that goes down as well. I mean, who's really making the money? I mean, off of YouTube pre-roll ads. It's a handful of really big channels and YouTube. So I think unless you are a Boogie, what is his name? Boogie 202988 or a PewDiePie or one of the real high-level YouTubers, you really shouldn't wave the flag of protecting the rights of content creators, and you can't use ad block, and we deserve your attention, because really you're not, in the long run. I mean, are you really going to make a living off of this? I think we've reached a point now where probably not. And again, I don't follow all genres of videos, but it certainly feels like there are a lot of people within retro gaming, within video gaming, who just have a hard time ascending to that level and staying at that level. I mean, quite frankly, if you look at the popular streamers on Twitch, and, I've referred to them as the streaming babes, the legendary Leahs, and a couple of these other people, they've disappeared. The horizon for making significant money in these genres is fairly limited. I mean, some YouTubers have stood the test of recent time, but I don't know if you're going to be able to do this for 30 years, if you're going to be able to retire off this, unless, again, you're at the top level. So I think the answer isn't to protect the regime that exists, but demand change. I think it's so funny that businesses today always tout this idea of creative destruction, especially when it comes to your jobs and your activities and your expectations for your life and your standard of living. But as soon as you point the creative destruction back at them and say, well, maybe you need to adapt your business practices to, function more efficiently in the 21st century. Oh, no, that's redistribution. That's a huge problem. Take the cable industry. They have fought tooth and nail to maintain what is now an archaic model of content delivery, and with increasingly raising their prices and monopolizing the distribution of internet around the country. They want you in a stranglehold, and they have no intention of letting up. So I think as a consumer base, hey, demand that the forces of creative destruction move in the opposite direction. Demand that there is a new model out there, but be willing to make a concession. I agree. It can't be free and not have ads. It can't be free for you and uncompensated for the platforms and the creators. That's insanity. But what isn't insane is finding new models that respect your life, that respect your intelligence, and that respect your time. And this could easily be done. A couple suggestions here is I've had no problems with kind of having the banner in the lower part of the YouTube video advertising something. So stick the banner in there and then give me an incentive. Like, I mean, so many times on YouTube, things are advertised to me that I don't care about. Like the other day, I got a Cheez-Its ad. Okay, now I don't like Cheez-Its. I don't eat Cheez-Its. And since I'm always searching primarily for things about technology, I think it's odd that I would get a Cheez-Its ad or a tampons ad or something like that. But if you flash something that said, hey, this is the product, it's in a banner, the banner's up there for 15 or 30 seconds. But if you click on it, and if you answer some questions about the product, we're going to enter you in to a raffle to earn a gift card, or to earn a prize related to the video in which this banner was embedded. I think people would go for that. I think the majority of people out there would see the graphic, and if it's relevant, you might click on it anyway, and if not, if it's not relevant, you might say, well, hey, do I really want that $100 American Express gift card? You might get a lot of people clicking on it that way. I think sponsored videos could also work in the sense, not that, hey, you're going to be Microsoft and pay an influencer on YouTube to promote your games, but rather you will just say, hey, we like your content, we appreciate what you're doing, we're going to pay you to display a watermark for our company, and then it's clickable and it'll take you to the Microsoft website or something like that. That is rational. That is reasonable. So it's another way, and that could actually, the majority of that money could actually go directly to the creators. Maybe you kick 10-15% up to YouTube, but then keep the rest of it because, hey, this is a specific advertiser saying, hey, we want to be displayed prominently on your channel. I think that could work, but that also means that we're going to have to pay a couple bucks a month to advertise YouTube. I think, to use YouTube. I think another thing that could work is bundling certain types of content into things like into something that would resemble a cable subscription. Now, again, this actually idea was kind of panned when it came up in things like SOPA and stuff like that, when you have kind of the nightmare of the internet that it would be managed like cable. That's not what I'm suggesting, but let's say the video platforms got together, whether, YouTube, Dailymotion. I guess a lot of people watch Facebook video, although I'm not familiar with it. Take a couple other things, or just say gaming. Destructoid, Kotaku, or maybe they're out of business now. GameSpot, IGN, YouTube. Bundle that all together and then charge $9.99 a month. So you have access to all this different content, all these different videos, all these different sources of information surrounding a hobby in which you're interested. And I'm charged $9.99 for that. I could kind of see that working. I think, again, it's a reasonable concession. But until that happens, I think you have to resist. I think you have to use ad block. I think you just have to stop consuming certain forms of media. I mean, I've given up on television. I can't pay $100 a month for hours and hours of stuff I don't care about. I don't care about the military channel. I don't want to buy a rare gem for $99.99. I don't care about whatever. I don't even know what's on anymore. But I was getting to the point I was paying for this, and I was like, I just don't watch it. Why? And when I do watch it, I'm being advertised to constantly. So cut the cord. It may mean just not consuming some of the stuff that you like, but I think the benefit that we have as retro gamers, I think many of us have a backlog of wonderful games and other kinds of movies and books and stuff like that, where we're going to be entertained no matter what. So it doesn't matter if we don't use these particular platforms. But I do think as long as ad block works, use it. And if it's a person, this is what I do personally, if it's a person that I really like, I disable it. And I want to support them. Or I'll donate something through the PayPal donate or something like that if they have it. So, I think that's rational. But I think it's irrational to consistently give up more of our time and more of our lives to view the things that we're interested in. There has to be, I think, a revolution in the way that we think about our time and the way that we think about the materials and topics in which we are interested, and move away from the current paradigm, because if you expand it to its farthest limits, it's going to actually destroy all of the things that we like to consume rather than support them. Alright, so another game I want to talk about this month is Pinball Arcade. Now, I did review Pinball Arcade on mobile platforms. I think I reviewed it on the PlayStation 4 as well, and that's the version I want to talk about. But quickly, if you're not familiar, Pinball Arcade is a pinball emulator. They recreate table layouts, and they use the actual ROMs from the scoring and display system and the sounds from the real games, and put together competent recreations of great pinball machines in digital form. And I have a love-hate relationship with these games. When I initially got Pinball Arcade on the PlayStation 4, it had some issues. The physics, I thought, were off. The ball was very floaty, and you couldn't use the triggers, or you couldn't use the triggers for the flippers. You had to use the shoulder buttons, which were less precise and felt very awkward. And because of this, I ultimately kind of put it down. And I popped it back in a couple days ago, and just because I wanted something to do on the PlayStation 4. I'd finished a fairly long evening of King of Fighters, and I just wanted to relax with something. And it downloaded gigabytes upon gigabytes of updates, and what I got was an actually very playable pinball game. It was a lot faster. You could use the triggers for the flippers, or you could assign them to other buttons. So I think this is, right now, the best way to get into Pinball Arcade, because it's going for $11, I think on Amazon or Walmart or something. So you get a fair number of tables, including Twilight Zone and Star Trek, and then things like Medieval Madness and Attack from Mars, and a whole bunch of other really good games. And this is, right now, the best and cheapest way to play the Pinball Arcade. And that's saying something, because the Pinball Arcade was released to Steam. And they release tables in seasons. Maybe there's 5 to 8 tables per season. So they're on season 6 now. And the current total price to play all of these games is $420. So for $11, the price, by the way, of 2 tables plus tax, you can get the entire Season 1 table on the PlayStation 4, and for that price I recommend it. The problem with Pinball Arcade is that this is an example of a company that is what we would call a rent seeker, and I've talked about this on a number of previous episodes. They have developed a good pinball game. It's not a great pinball game. In fact, it's slower and less responsive than its main competitor, which is Pinball FX, and they do like the Star Wars and Marvel fantasy tables that you can have TIE fighters go onto the screen and shoot at the ball and stuff like that. but the core physics and playability of that game, I think, is a little bit better. And I say that only because I live in a reasonable proximity to a pinball arcade, and especially with Season 1, I've played most of those tables in person. And as I move through Season 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I've actually played most of these games. Especially the batch that's from, like, 88 to 95. That's what this Pinball Arcade specializes in. And I have to say, the Pinball Arcade games are not like the real tables. They're close, they have the objectives right, they've got the sounds, they capture the experience, but they're not capturing the gameplay, the physics, the speed of the game. It's not there. So their argument that this is the closest you'll get, look, you can pay $7,000 and have a Medieval Madness in your house, or you could pay us $5 for a regular table or $8 for a pro table and get this in your house, or you could just buy every single season of this. And since that doesn't hold true, what you find with the Pinball Arcade is that they're surviving off of the licenses. They're getting all of these licenses. Some of them involve, like with Terminator 2 Pinball, a great game, Schwarzenegger and all these movie properties and stuff like that. So they're sticking this kind of mediocre engine onto all these great licenses, and they're monetizing this thing to the moon. This is an exercise in extreme greedy monetization that just so happens to involve pinball. And it is a shame, particularly because the sound has always been an issue. I know that they are really working with the original sound hardware of these machines, but how about this? For this price, why don't you remaster some of these soundtracks so that you don't have your speakers, hissing as you're playing these games? Of course, in an arcade, when you actually play these games, it just needs to be loud. But when you're playing it over a good pair of speakers, and it sounds awful, maybe you should address that. So I really can't recommend that people go out and buy all of these games. And it's tempting. It really is tempting because Pinball Arcade really does have some nice recreations of these tables. But it's time to stop calling them guys who are doing a passion project. If this was a passion project, you would want to get it into the hands of as many people as possible. And I find it very telling that they never released another PlayStation 4 physical game. I mean, you can put Pinball Arcade in, you have all of your Season 1 tables, and then you can buy the remaining seasons, but you're still paying an exorbitant price. So I think if you wanted to get this, if you really loved pinball, stagger it so that the newest seasons are available only at full price. By the way, full price is $30 for the regular tables, and I think $40 for the pro tables. And what the pro tables do is it gives you access to the operator menus, so you can say how many balls you get per credit and stuff like that. So instead of doing that, just give everyone the full tables, seasons of them, and what they charge, the MSRP on the first one was $20. So I would buy, or maybe it was it 25? I don't know. I want to say it was $20. So every year I would buy this every year on the PlayStation for that price. But you're asking me to pay $420 on Steam? Not happening. But as far as video game console pinball games go, at $11 for all of the Season 1 tables currently available, I give that a strong recommendation on the PlayStation 4. All right, two quick news items here. The first is the delay of Gran Turismo Sport, I believe it's called, the next Gran Turismo game on the PlayStation 4, delayed until 2017 with no real specifics as to why, other than they want to make it the best experience possible and they need more time. Now, I've said in the past that whenever a game is delayed, you typically have the two arguments. One, people are pissed off, they were looking forward to it, and then on the other side, well, delay it as long as possible. We want the game to be awesome, and we don't care. Take your time. Don't release a broken game. Although it's kind of strange how, even with a lot of delays, the games are released broken. But I think in this particular instance, this is particularly damning for Gran Turismo as a series and Sony as a company. Why? Because Gran Turismo was supposed to be one of the marquee PlayStation Neo games, and that console, I believe, is releasing in October, maybe late September, early October, and to not have that, I think is going to hurt this holiday season. I do think that there are a subset of gamers for whom Gran Turismo is still very important, and to not have it out, period, is if they don't have a PlayStation 4, obviously they're not going to buy one, and maybe even if they had a PlayStation 4, it may have been a compelling enough reason to upgrade to play that game at its highest level of graphical fidelity. But it's a problem also for the series in that I really think they've mangled Gran Turismo. I mean, 4 was an event. I remember people taking off of work to play Gran Turismo 4. Certainly when Gran Turismo 5 came out, I was pumped up. I pre-ordered it. I put, as I've mentioned before, tons of hours into that game. But I didn't feel like I was ready to go into Gran Turismo 6 simply because I had this, obviously massive save file for 5. And if you remember with 5, they created the saves in such a way that it would slowly expand to eat up your hard drive. And in fact, I had to replace my PlayStation hard drive because of that. And at a certain point, I tried to do it again, and something was corrupted. So I was stuck with this file. It had ballooned to I don't know how many gigabytes. So I didn't want to erase all of my progress just to play 6. And 6 obviously came out either at the tail end of the PS3 lifespan or maybe even into the lifespan of the PS4. So I just didn't feel compelled to play it. And I know other racing fans who are in that position. But since Gran Turismo 6, and whenever this new GT or Sport version is going to come out, I mean, so much progress has happened in sim racing. On the computer, sim racing has far eclipsed anything Gran Turismo gave us, from the car models, to the force feedback, to the physics, to the car interiors, to just about every aspect of the game, weather cycles, things like that. So it's not like the Gran Turismo can possibly compete with all of that. Not to mention all of the different hardware support and different configurations you can have on the system, including VR. And I guess that's another reason why it hurts Sony, is because I imagine this game was also going to be available for PlayStation VR. So it's a lot of ground to cover for the series. And then you take its most direct competition, which is Forza, whether we're talking about the numbered Forza games or Horizon. They've been on such a roll, and they are now available with cross-buy on the PC, so you can play those games at their highest level of graphical capability. I just wonder where Gran Turismo goes from here. I wonder if there will be interest. I mean, I like the collecting aspect of the series, but I think a lot of people who have moved on to these different games, whether it's Assetto Corsa, Project Cars, certainly iRacing, even though I despise iRacing, Forza and all of that, I don't think collecting 6 different variants of the Nissan Skyline is going to be satisfying anymore. Similarly, I don't think that there's a big segment of the sim racing population who's going to be excited by the photo mode or something like that. So it's going to have to do something very special, and even if it is a heavily online-focused community racer, iRacing has that crown, and I think for the serious competitors out there, they're going to stick to iRacing. So it's a problem, and I hate to see a series in that position. I think if they had just held back and released 6 on the PlayStation 4, even if they had to use the same car models, just got it at 1080p, 60 FPS, gave it a nice little shiny coat, I think it would have done more for the series. But I hope it's not a lost cause. I want them to succeed, but I'm not sure that they can. Now, the second news story was about the No Man's Sky refunds. There was kind of a rumor circulating around the internet that Amazon, Steam, and I think maybe PSN were giving no questions asked refunds to anyone who bought No Man's Sky, even if they, in the case of Steam, exceeded the refund period, or even in the case of PlayStation Network or Amazon, there was no official refund policy in place. And it turned out, at least in the case of Steam, that wasn't true. You could still get a refund for it if you had played it for, I think, less than 2 hours and had it less than 14 days, or whatever their policy is. And some people said that with Amazon and PSN, you had to call customer service. I'm not sure, but certain players were returning it supposedly with 30 hours in, 50 hours in, things like that. And someone from Sony came out and said, well, that's robbery. You know, this is, how can you possibly return a game after 30 hours? Please, this game is a work of art. You can't do that. And again, of course, video games as art being one of the topics close to my heart, I had to, it just sort of caught my eye. And I mean, I'm going to say that I do agree. If you hate a game, how could you play it for 30 hours? There are a lot of games that I despise, that I pay money for, and sometimes you can't return them. But I just can't put 30 hours or 50 hours into a bad game. So he's right on that account. But it does raise the question, if you marketed a game as being infinite, if you marketed a game as being a kind of sandbox offering constantly new opportunities for discovery, and it turns out that as you play through it, after you crest across the 2-hour mark, and you're hoping to find new things, and you're hoping that it takes forever to get to the middle of the galaxy, and whatever else was promised that wasn't delivered. I can't follow the whole thing, but do you have a point where you lied to? And I think it seems like a lot of players were in fact lied to about this title. Again, 30 hours, you shouldn't be able to return it, but the use of the term art here is the kind of self-serving application of the concept to video games that really irritates me. If video games are art, why are they marketed as products with features? See, the companies can't have it both ways. Even if you take something that's purportedly art, like, I don't know, a Marvel film or a DC superhero film or something like that, they get you excited about what the whole of the work will be, but you can't get a refund. I mean, they don't list the different features of a given movie. And like the Batman versus Superman movie, a lot of people were upset with the story exposition, with how the characters were presented, and all of that. You couldn't ask for a refund for that, so that's a stronger argument. But games are hyped as having features, and then their failures are defended by this label of art. And I just think people need to be called out on that. If a game is bad, then it's a bad product. Its reality does not correspond to its feature set. I mean, imagine something like Madden. If Madden said, oh, you know, we're art, so the whole game could suck, I think it would hurt its sales, even though, by all accounts, Madden has a lot of issues every year. Again, I'm not saying that, this particular Sony exec is evil. I'm not really defending trying to return a game after you spend 50 hours with it, but I think we need to just call people out on an imprecise and self-serving use of the term art. So I think it was kind of fitting that on this episode I've decided to take up the question of advertising on the internet, because about a week and a half after I recorded that segment, we were hit with the news that YouTube was enforcing a more ad-friendly policy that allowed them to demonetize videos that advertisers found offensive. And this was just another shot across the bow of free speech in general, and of course a deepening of the kind of internal conflicts within the YouTube community surrounding advertising. So what precisely happened? Well, towards the end of August, a guy by the name of Phil DeFranco, I'm not familiar with him, sort of posted a video in which he said, I noticed a number of my videos have been demonetized. I take it he does a news channel of some sort. Anyway, it came out that the YouTube policy states that content is considered to be not advertiser friendly if, and it's not limited to this, but if it is sexually suggestive and includes partial nudity or sexual humor, if it shows violence, including the display of serious injury and events related to violent extremism. This is a particularly onerous one. Inappropriate language, including harassment, swearing, and vulgar language. Promotion of drugs and regulated substances, including the selling, use, and abuse of such items. And I think most damning for YouTube, the controversial discussion of controversial or sensitive subjects and events, including subjects related to war, political conflicts, natural disasters, tragedies, even if graphic imagery is not shown. So, again, this was supposedly always in their terms of use. Of course, terms of use, you just sort of click through them. If you read and disagreed with the majority of end-user licensing agreements or terms of use, you wouldn't be able to basically function in the world. You wouldn't be able to use internet, computers, cell phones, and so forth. But I mean, look, I understand you don't want to post videos of violent extremism like ISIS beheadings. I can see where you may want to just sort of a despicable organization like that sort of limit their social media exposure. I understand not showing the use of illegal drugs, but if people are potheads or something and want to talk about it, I don't really see the harm in that. Sexually suggestive content, including, well, of course we know you can't have nudity on YouTube, but, sexually suggestive content and sexual humor form quite a large percentage of the American entertainment landscape, so I find it odd that they would reduce that on YouTube. But then, of course, what is the distinction between inappropriate language and vulgar language? Now, you could say, all right, we're going to limit swearing. I don't think you should, but if you said you're going to limit swearing, okay. But inappropriate language, very vague term. What constitutes inappropriate language? Similarly, what constitutes controversial or sensitive subjects? This basically makes the bulk of all news coverage ever. Why do we have newspapers? Why do we have news shows? Presumably, of course it's not necessarily the case these days, but presumably to present to an educated public the truth about world events and local events and politics. So what's going on here is a kind of double betrayal. It's a personal betrayal to the people that made YouTube what it is, and it's also a betrayal of, I think, core, I'm not even going to say American values, but core Western values. Now, let's take the personal betrayal first. I'm going to just use Alpha Omega Sin as an example. I don't have anything against him. I don't particularly care for his stuff a lot of the time, although, actually, strangely, I think when he is sort of calm and not, dropping 6 million F-bombs, he's actually very good to listen to. But he's created this persona where he, provides these kind of raw, visceral, profanity-laden reactions. And to his credit, he's got almost, I think, 475,000 subscribers. He's built a brand, and he's built a persona that's very successful on YouTube. Why should he have to censor himself, and why should YouTube censor him, potentially, I don't know if it's going to happen or not, for producing the kind of content that brought in a big audience? The same thing goes for all of the other people on YouTube. I don't really know who the most controversial people are, but, I mean, there are people who do sexually suggestive things. There are people who do crazy humor that is not necessarily appropriate. And, of course, there are a lot of people who do news and analysis. And, look, some of it is conspiratorial. Some of it is rather lowbrow. But people have the right to express their opinion. And YouTube has profited from so many people for so long. And now you're going to take their livelihoods away from them in some cases. That is deplorable, and it's an extension of something I talked about a long time ago. I think it was in a video called The Problem of Money on YouTube. And my argument was that when it comes to the issue of fair use, YouTube is essentially using the law, or their interpretation of the law, to limit the production values of certain people. If I'm not with a multi-channel network, I can't use assets, even in fair use, to enhance my video. So essentially I become a talking head, which is what happened to me if I wanted to monetize videos. Now you're having YouTube, through the legality of a terms of service agreement that everyone has signed to be on YouTube, now they're suppressing free speech. And that's dangerous, because what you're essentially saying is that the average, and again I hate this term, content creator, can't come on to the largest and easiest platform for self-expression online. Maybe you think that's Facebook. I've always assumed it to be YouTube. And you can't talk about the issues of the day. I mean, for example, I heard that, I'm starting to sound like Donald Trump here. I heard people saying, but as I've sort of read Twitter and things, articles about this, it's been suggested that it's not just terrorism or drug use or extreme sexual vulgarity that's being sort of picked up by this bot, or however YouTube's controlling it. It's people who are talking about suicide prevention or their experience dealing with rape. And these are valid topics, and topics that could help people. I mean, alcoholism and other things. So I think that's a particularly dangerous precedent to set. And like I said, because these guidelines are so vague, seemingly at the whim of YouTube or its advertising partners, any language could fall in under these categories. And then, of course, people would be directed to the approved outlets for commentary. And, of course, assuming those approved outlets are things like Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC, to say nothing of the diversity of opinion, the intricacy and nuance of the analysis available to us here in America will be reduced to virtually nothing. Now, there is a broader betrayal here of the spirit of Western liberal democracy, and that seems to be a big jump, but let me try to make that for you. I think it's very funny that people who oppose this will preface their criticism by saying, well, YouTube's a private company, and so it could do what it wants. And YouTube, this is a private company. It has its own laws. It has its own terms of service. If you don't like it, you don't have to use it. It's a private company. What does that matter? I mean, we live in a country that supposedly offers us an opportunity for free speech. And while free speech has, I think, always been somewhat limited on the major airways, the internet was supposed to be a forum where everyone could engage in free and hopefully thoughtful speech. But what we have here in the United States is all sorts of ways to suppress that free speech. And again, in a lot of cases, it's frequently through the law. Now, again, it's very subtle. I mean, if you think about regimes in the past that have suppressed free speech, it's always been kind of a top-down approach. It's always been a very obvious approach. You spoke out or you wrote an article, and then you were arrested, beaten, or you simply disappeared. Here in the United States, I've always thought that the suppression of free speech occurs through devaluing thought. On the one hand, people will just say everything is relative, it's just your opinion, and once everything is a relative opinion that has no objective validity, then it's really not worth listening to anything. And then also through creating legal barriers to speech, and I think this is an example of that. Now, one of the ways that they do this is through advertising. And of course, this is the other mantra. We all simply assume, well, everyone has to advertise. That's the way of the world. Advertising exists. That's just the way of things. Well, I mean, you can have advertising, but you can also have free speech. And if you sort of create a mechanism for controlling the distinction between your editorial activities and your promotional activities and your securing of advertising, you can, by and large, have somewhat independent content. Now, you might argue that it's impossible, and sure, there are outlets like Consumer Reports, for instance, that has never taken advertising and relies on subscriber fees to produce their content. But I think when advertising becomes, as I mentioned before, so psychotic and so prevalent, of course, advertisers will become paranoid, and they don't want to be associated with even the slightest bit of information that could be seen as negative. And since, well, let's face it, there are a lot of negative things in this world, what can you, eventually, you won't be able to talk about anything. I think, strangely, the only type of language that will be allowed is advertising speak. So we'll just have a YouTube or an internet consisting of unboxing and paper-thin reactions that do nothing to inform the public beyond sort of telling them what sort of minimal choices that they have when they go to the store. So it's a situation that may still seem fairly limited now. It's just one kind of YouTube policy, but I think it portends very badly for the state of the country to come. And I mean, I guess, how do you oppose it? Well, I think in the case of YouTube, if people find that they are really struggling to monetize their videos, and of course it came out a little bit after the fact that YouTube will allow you to appeal the demonetization of your videos, and I think in some cases the monetization will be restored if the bot flagged the video in an incorrect way. Again, I'm not really sure how this works. I'm not sure if it's like the music bot or if they're searching for just sort of key terms and banning all the videos with those key terms. But, you know, it's still lost revenue for people, especially if this is your job, so to speak, and you know, you're going to lose a couple days worth of monetization precisely at the time when your video hits and could make an impact if you're talking about something in the news. So I think the solution, and I've always said this, is for big YouTubers to come together and create an alternative. And if YouTube is going to stick to these policies, then create an alternative that specifically invites and promotes suggestive content of all kinds. I personally think it should be something like an HBO, a subscription-based service where people can sort of put out whatever edgy content that they want. And we've seen a couple people try to do this. What was that guy's name? Mark Bussler, I believe, of Classic Game Room. He tried to go it on his own for a little while, came back to YouTube. Happy Console Gamer, and who else? GameSack and a couple of other people did the Final Bosses site, which is still going on and still gives them a freer outlet for expression, but I would argue hasn't really taken off the way they had hoped. But it has to be the big guys like the PewDiePies and whoever else. Come together, get some seed capital together, and create a new company to challenge YouTube and to give producers a home where they can make some money. And, they could work both. They can put their normal stuff on YouTube and then push the audience over to this other site for their edgier stuff. And I think it would be a service to the content creator community because, let's face it, even though a lot of the bigger people run their channels like small businesses, I think when you're attached to a platform, and this shows it specifically, you're not really running a small business. You are being allowed to function and pay a rent in an attempt to make a living, but the conditions under which you make your living can be changed at any time, and even as we've seen here, the application of a clause in the terms of service agreement can potentially put you out of business. So I think it would be a wonderful service to go out there and to if you're a big YouTuber, create something and give people a chance to continue doing what they do and hopefully being as successful or more successful on the new platform. Now, how do we combat this type of thing socially? I think that is the question, because no matter what your politics are, I don't think you want to live in a society that is constantly cranking down on your ability to not only speak freely, but to have your speech and your ideas presented to the world. And let's face it, even if no one discovers your stuff immediately on YouTube, which is where I've been my whole YouTube career, at least it exists. But if you come up with increasingly technical and onerous reasons to demonetize videos, and let's face it, eventually, if you can demonetize them, because advertisers don't want to be associated with these ideas or events or opinions, what's to say that in the future you won't be able to upload them at all? Because again, the advertisers have so much power that maybe they don't want their advertising to appear on a platform that even hosts videos that are offensive to them based on whatever criteria they choose to apply. So I don't think people are going to boycott YouTube, but I think you can still create banned press. You can tweet about it. You can write about it. You can make videos about it. I think Alpha Omega Sin made a video. I didn't get to see it, but I think I saw it pop up on my feed of him just sort of bleeping every negative word in one of his rants or reviews or something like that. And, what could you actually understand? I think other people should do that as well. I don't know, though, if we're at a point where we can really oppose this. That's why I think it's going to be up to some rather intrepid entrepreneurial people to create services that not only give a place for the audience to go, but sort of highlight the injustice of the existing platforms. So, revolutionary online platforms, if you will. I think that might be the best way, but this is particularly bad. And I think, as I pointed out in the previous segment, it's advertising itself that is the problem. And I'm going to leave you with a quote. I'm going to leave you with a quote from a book called Dialectic of Enlightenment. It was written by two German sociologists, Jewish sociologists, who went back to Germany right after World War II and kind of helped rebuild the university system. And so they wrote this book, a collection of essays really, and one of the essays was on what they call the culture industry, basically an analysis of mass media. And they had this line, when they were talking about advertising, that I found that always stuck with me. See if I can remember it here. They said, the logic of business, veiled as an advertisement and disguised as choice, becomes the Führer's final command. And I've always thought that was powerful because it shows you a kind of dual ability for advertisement to, of course, not make people Nazis. It's not to say that, advertisement or ad agencies are Nazis or anything like that, but to show you this dual tension, this dual totalitarian tendency in the advertisement. Not only do advertisements give us the illusion of choice, which is an insight that many people have made over the years, but they also kind of suppress alternative thinking. You just have one logic. It's the logic of business. It is the voice of authority speaking through this. And it's sad to see this taking root in the United States right now. So, again, you can guess what my politics are on the issue, but I think it's in all of our interests to oppose psychotic advertising, to fight for a reasonable, profitable model of advertising that kind of keeps the internet going, keeps content creators paid, but at the same time protects our basic freedoms. It seems fairly rational, and precisely because of that, very difficult in today's America.
This is called advertising lullaby. Keeping in mind, of course, that the whole purpose of advertising is to lull you to sleep. Quality, value, style, service, selection, convenience, economy, savings, performance, experience, hospitality, low rates, friendly service, name brands, easy terms, affordable prices, money-back guarantee, free installation. Free admission, free appraisal, free alterations, free delivery, free estimates, free home trial, and free parking. No cash, no problem, no kidding. No fuss, no muss, no risk, no obligation, no red tape, no down payment, no entry fee, no hidden charges, no purchase necessary, no one will call on you, no payments or interest till September. But limited time only, though, so act now, order today, send no money, offer good while supplies last, 2 to a customer, each item sold separately, batteries not included, mileage may vary, all sales are final, allow 6 weeks for delivery, some items not available, some assembly required, some restrictions may apply. So come on in. Come on in. Come on in for a free demonstration and a free consultation with our friendly professional staff. Our experienced and knowledgeable sales representatives will help you make a selection that's just right for you and just right for your budget. And say, don't forget to pick up your free gift, a classic, deluxe, custom, designer, luxury, prestige, high-quality, premium, select, gourmet pocket pencil sharpener. Yours for the asking, no purchase necessary. It's our way of saying thank you. And if you act now, we'll include an extra added free complimentary bonus gift, a classic, deluxe, custom, designer, luxury, prestige, high-quality, premium, select, gourmet, combination key ring, magnifying glass, and garden hose in a genuine imitation leather-style carrying case with authentic vinyl trim. Yours for the asking, no purchase necessary. It's our way of saying thank you. Actually, it's our way of saying bend over just a little bit farther so we can stick this big advertising dick up your ass a little bit deeper. A little bit deeper. A little bit deeper.
All right, we're going to start off the retro segment of the podcast by pointing out another kind of hidden treasure on YouTube for retro gaming, and that is the YouTube channel of Retro Gamer Magazine. Now, this is the magazine out of the UK that is one of the best sources of information out there on the hobby. Now, of course, here in the States, it's extremely expensive. I think it's like $13 an issue. And the subscription fee, if you wanted to get it all the way from the UK, is exorbitant. It's like $150, $170 a year. But what you get on the YouTube channel is a review of every magazine, and you get to look at the really cool layouts. It's two of the editors. They sit down. They're just two guys talking intelligently about retro games, and then sort of a camera looking over, and you can see the page layout. You can't read it, but you can appreciate all of the wonderful graphical work that goes into these magazines. And if you've seen them, you know that they're some of the most beautiful video game magazines ever made. And again, very interesting discussions to go along with these things, with these videos. So they do one per month for their new issue, and it's just fun. It's a good listen, and it's a great kind of way to reminisce about these terrific games. So they get very little support. They have about 700 subscribers. Very few people watch these videos, and it kind of pains me because this is exactly the kind of intelligent content that we should be celebrating. I talked about this last month with Neo Turbo Maniac. I've mentioned many times, like John Hancock has come on to YouTube, and he's got like 11,000 subscribers. When this guy is, this guy is probably the best collector and one of the more articulate guys on the hobby out there. And these people are struggling to capture an audience where some other people who just spout kind of superficial nonsense about retro games have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. So I think the Retro Gamer Magazine really deserves some more attention, and it deserves some support, because with magazines dying, how long do they have, really? I want them to go on for as long as possible, but you would think that the U.S. would be a really big market for them, and yet the pricing is so outrageous. I try to support them when I can. I subscribed for 1 year, and I got like an introductory rate. Then when it hit $170, I wasn't going to spend that on a video game magazine. Plus, I was running out of space. So now, if I see it out on the newsstand and it's a topic that interests me, I do pick it up. But this is an example of a group of guys who really are passionate, who do a ton of research. Their write-ups and interviews are second to none in the hobby, and I think we need to support them and enjoy their work while it lasts. Alright, so last week we talked about the Retro League tournament, and they took in all of the submissions, they tallied everything up, and we now have a bracket. So I'm going to go through my picks, get a little bit more in-depth about why I'm picking each game, and then depending on how many podcasts I get out between now and October, you'll eventually hear me work through the whole thing. It could be that I go through several different rounds in one podcast, or depending on when they release the new brackets, it might be a little bit more spread out. I think it goes until mid-October, but we'll see. Anyway, let's have a look at the games that made it. And I'm going to start with Genesis Bracket 1. We've got Sonic the Hedgehog versus Wanderers from Ys. Ys 3. And this is a pretty tough one because I really do like Ys on the Sega Genesis, I think, or Ys 3 on the Sega Genesis. I think it is the best version. However, it's hard to go against Sonic the Hedgehog. I think Sonic the Hedgehog, as I mentioned in the last podcast, was a revolutionary game for its time. It's certainly, of all the games I was playing and renting on the NES, and on the TurboGrafx 16, incidentally, I just felt Sonic kind of like woke me up. It was fast, huge sprites, great colors. I talked about all of that. And I think that gets overlooked. And because I can vote for another version of Ys 3 but a little bit later here in round 1, I'm going to give it to Sonic the Hedgehog and knock Ys 3 out. So Genesis Bracket 4, we've got Toe Jam and Earl versus Road Rash. And this is another tough one because I really like both games, and I'm happy that Road Rash made it on there. I didn't think it would. I did pick it, but I think that Road Rash, it came along at a time when, as a console player, you had that pretty standard pseudo three-dimensional Outrun style racing game, but never done quite as well as Outrun. And what you had with Road Rash was a game that actually played pretty well. Plus, you had the attack mechanic, which just seemed so cool at the time. A friend of mine and I just played this all weekend, one weekend. So it's an EA game, and they have the kind of bad reputation today. But back then, Road Rash was a great game. That having been said, Toe Jam and Earl, to me, was a fun game. I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I rented it on several occasions, and it just feels like the early Genesis to me. And I just thought it was such a unique concept, and I'm just going to have to go with it on that. I just think in the history of the Sega Genesis, Toe Jam and Earl just stands out as a particularly fun and innovative game. Bracket 2, Streets of Rage versus Outrun on the Genesis, and I think this is a clear win for Streets of Rage. Outrun wasn't bad, but to me, Outrun is an arcade game. I don't think there has been a good version of Outrun, the classic Outrun for the systems, until the 3DS remake, which was a arcade emulation, arguably the Saturn game, but I think this is a clear win for Streets of Rage. Streets of Rage, obviously, when you think of it, it's Streets of Rage 2 that pulls you in, but 1 is a good game in its own right, and I think showed a lot of people that the Genesis was really capable hardware, because it was doing essentially Final Fight and actually doing it better in some instances with Streets of Rage, and then, of course, Streets of Rage 2 obviously took it so much further. So I'll give it to that one. I'll give it to Streets of Rage. Bracket 3, Wonder Boy and Monster World versus Quackshot starring Donald Duck. And I'll admit that I don't really have fond memories of Quackshot. I rented it. If I remember correctly, it was kind of an impressive game as far as parallax scrolling and size of the sprites. But I remember not liking it as much as Castle of Illusion, which came out the year before, and up against Wonder Boy and Monster World, which is a game I really found satisfying. I didn't play it all that much back in the day, but I bought it actually a few years ago now and went through it and really enjoyed it. So I'm going to give that to Wonder Boy and Monster World. And we move on to the TurboGrafx bracket. It's funny, some of these pairings are so vicious that you're going to knock a good game out right at the outset. And you've got Bonk's Adventure and Bomberman, and I think these are two games that should, or Bonk's Revenge, should go further. I think Bonk's Revenge is the better game, so I'm going to choose that. But I put a ton of time into Bomberman, one of my favorite TurboGrafx 16 games, and one that I would actually vote above everything else on the TurboGrafx list. So I feel really bad about voting it out, but the bracket being what it is, I'm going to have to go with Bonk's Revenge. And the last podcast I talked about why I thought Bonk's Revenge and the Bonk series was particularly exciting and innovative. Kadash versus Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. I have to admit I didn't like Kadash on the TurboGrafx 16. I played it in the arcade and kind of enjoyed it in the arcade. I always kind of found it interesting when you had the side-scrolling action or beat-em-up games try to incorporate some degree of RPG gameplay. I didn't have Sherlock Holmes. I've never played it. When I traded my TurboGrafx, or traded it away, the people to whom I gave it got the Sherlock Holmes game because they got the CD attachment, and I saw them play it, and it never did it for me. I know that's supposedly one of the better CD games, like full motion video, and it was apparently impressive in its day, but I will take Kadash over that. Parasol Stars and Turrican. Now, Turrican was one of the games that I had and played quite a bit, but I always found it way too frustrating. I thought it, just especially when you even compared it against Mega Turrican on the Genesis, there was something about the TurboGrafx 16 game that was so difficult, and of course I put a lot of time into it because it was just one of the games that I had, and it has a nice soundtrack, but Parasol Stars is a fun little game. It seems to have some affinity with Bubble Bobble. I don't know the whole story behind that, other than obviously the character and the mechanics are a little bit different, but I liked Parasol Stars. I've played it. I didn't necessarily play it back in the day, but I've played it since. So I think that's a solid game. Kind of a nice example of the bright, bold colors that the TurboGrafx was pulling off back then. And Wanderers from Ease versus Tailspin. That's the last bracket for the TurboGrafx. And like I said, I'm going to pick Wanderers from Ease here. I was still a good game. Again, I thought it was a little lacking compared to the Genesis version, but it's a very good game, so we'll get it in, hopefully get it to the next round. Arcade bracket, bracket 2, as it were, bracket 1, with Street Fighter 2 versus Total Carnage. To me, there's no question, it is Street Fighter 2. I've talked about that game quite a bit here on the podcast. The next arcade bracket, Sunset Riders and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time. And this is a really tough one because both are great games, just Konami at its absolute arcade pinnacle. I'm going to have to give it to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles just because I thought that the original Turtles arcade game literally, well, not literally, but it was literally a major event for me and figuratively blew my mind when I saw that. It felt like I was watching the cartoon, and all of those Konami games had that feeling. When this one came out, I want to say Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game was in 89 or 90. This in 91 just took it so much further, and it was such a better game, building off of all the things that made the arcade game so good. And Sunset Riders is a wonderful game in its own right, but I don't think it quite is at the level of Turtles in Time. The next one, I wish I could rearrange the brackets, but you've got The Simpsons and WWF WrestleFest, and I love WWF WrestleFest. I think it's a wonderful wrestling game. I think it was the best, as I said, probably the best wrestling game of that era. I know some people will throw Fire Pro at me, the early Fire Pro games on the Super Famicom and the PC Engine. On a technical level, perhaps, on a roster level, perhaps, but WrestleFest, I remember seeing that for the first time at a birthday party in that Sports Park arcade that I've mentioned so often here, and I was just like, holy crap, that's the WWF. That's what I'm watching on TV. Earthquake is doing his splash or his ass drop on Hogan, and I'm seeing it right in the game. And just all of my favorite wrestlers, finishing moves. It is so much fun. That having been said, I think The Simpsons is Konami's best arcade game from that era. I think it's the artistic high point. I think it sort of has the mechanics and the action that you found in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, in the X-Men game, and it just takes kind of like a wacky twist on all of that. I mean, it was The Simpsons come to life. And honestly, I've played through all of these Konami arcade games fairly recently in a local arcade, and I have to give it to The Simpsons. I really think it is an absolutely tremendous game, and it kills me to knock out WrestleFest, particularly because if you come to the last bracket here, Terminator 2 Arcade versus Terminator 2 Pinball, I think you could have had The Simpsons versus Terminator 2 Pinball and WrestleFest versus Terminator 2 Arcade, and then you could have gotten another one through, and you would have done justice to all of these games. But both Terminator 2 Arcade and Pinball games were revolutionary and were standout games. Now, obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, you will remember the Terminator 2 arcade cab with the guns, that visceral feel, the way it rumbled, the sound it made. It looked cool, it looked dangerous, and it was pretty fun to play, especially back then, if you could reach the cabinet. And I remember, I don't think I included this in the last podcast because the segment that I did got erased. But I remember parents like being afraid of their kids playing it because that gun was so realistic. And I didn't have any particular affinity for the Terminator franchise. I saw the first one. It didn't really do anything for me, so I've never actually seen Terminator 2, and yet that game just seems so cool. Now, Terminator 2 Pinball is one in the long line of really great Williams pinball games, starting from about 91 through 98. I mean, they were on a complete roll, and Terminator is one of the best. I mean, it takes the funhouse aesthetic of having the big animatronic head in there. It's, if I remember correctly, it has like a gun trigger for the plunger, and it has these sort of two ramps and great sound bites from the movies, and it also captured like the gunplay. It was one of the pinball games. It just felt like, you know, you're hitting certain shots, and it kind of captured the gunfighting of what I assume was in the movie, like the first one and this recent one. I think Terminator 2 Pinball is the greater achievement in its genre, and I'll go with that. Now, next we have PC, the PC category, and honestly, I have played very few, if any, of these games. So I'm just going to go based on what I've seen online. First one, you have Monkey Island 2, LeChuck's Revenge, versus Commander Keen and Goodbye Galaxy. I'm going to go with Commander Keen because it is a platforming game for the most part, and Monkey Island more of a text adventure, which was a genre that I never really got into. Same deal with the next bracket, Out of This World versus Adventures of Willie Beamish. Both seem like text adventures. I think the aesthetic of Out of This World is better, so I'll go with that. Wing Commander 2 versus the Chessmaster 3000. And I don't know that if I had no, I think I did have the Chessmaster 3000 now that I think about it. I didn't really know how to play chess back then when I was a kid, although I remember seeing the Chessmaster 3000 running in a Radio Shack and just seeing the animation of the pieces and thinking to myself, oh my god, chess looks so exciting. So I'm just going to go with it based on that. Wing Commander looks like a fun kind of FMV game before FMV was possible. But again, I don't like the text adventures so much. Lemmings versus Duke Nukem. I'm going to choose Duke Nukem just because I played it. Not really a big fan of either, to be honest. Super Nintendo bracket. Super Mario World versus UN Squadron. UN Squadron, a side-scrolling arcade game based on the Area 88 manga and anime series, which I was introduced to by Johnny Millennium through one of his videos a couple of years ago. Actually, a very good OVA series, or at least the first one. I've only seen the first episode. But Super Mario World, what can you say? That is a definite, and one that I assume will go quite far in the tournament. Now, I'm noticing that Legend of Zelda wasn't on here, so maybe that was a 92 release, and again, Moby Games probably listed it in 91 because it came out in Japan. So we have F-Zero versus Super Castlevania 4. Super Castlevania 4 is an excellent game, but I'm a huge F-Zero fan. I think F-Zero was, again, with Super Mario World, arguably one of the greatest system release games, launch games of all time, and it really showed the power of the Super Nintendo. I remember, as I've said, I think I said this, when I reviewed it, I was over at this cousin's house, and I've mentioned them a few times. I was a girl, and so her father would get her all of these great video games, and she just didn't, it was okay, she played a little bit and then put it down, and I'd go over there like once a year, and I remember going over there, I guess it was around the holidays. Super Nintendo would just come out, and playing F-Zero and just being in complete awe. And going back today, I mean, both these games hold up, but F-Zero still feels wonderful. So I will vote for F-Zero. Super Ghouls and Ghosts versus SimCity. SimCity was a fun game. To me, that's actually one of the games I played on the PC. And I never really liked playing it with a controller, so I'll have to go with Super Ghouls and Ghosts, even though that really wasn't one of my favorite franchises either. Final Fantasy II versus Super R-Type. Super R-Type was a very good game. However, and I have a soft spot for R-Type because it was one of the first games I got for the TurboGrafx, and so it was a series that I always enjoyed. Nonetheless, Final Fantasy II, even though it was a Final Fantasy that I played very little of back in the day, I played it on early emulation, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, but so I didn't have that immediate connection, but it's still, I think, seeing it run in a store, looking at the Nintendo Power, it did feel like the type of RPG experience that I would have really appreciated, and even though it paled in comparison to what came after on the system, I just personally would enjoy that game more than Super R-Type. So we go to the NES bracket. Tecmo Super Bowl versus Batman Return of the Joker. Now, I know that Batman Return of the Joker is known for excellent gameplay, some of the best NES graphics, and some pretty good sound. And I don't know if there's a sound hack where you can get the better sound from the Japanese version, or if it was, in fact, that you had to get the Japanese version to get that soundtrack. I understand. Fine, it's a good game, but Tecmo Super Bowl, to me, was the culmination of everything that made Tecmo Bowl great. And I think with the bad rap that sports games get, you overlook how influential Tecmo Super Bowl was. Well, Tecmo Bowl was. It was the kind of game where even people in my family, the old uncles or whatever who came over, and they kind of had that attitude like, go outside, what are you doing on that stupid video game? When they saw it, and they saw the play calling, and it was so easy to pick up and enjoy, even they could get into it. So Tecmo Super Bowl, by having the real teams, all of the real teams with the logos, player licenses, and all of that, it just took it a step further It's an absolute classic. It's still as fun as ever, and I want to say that there are people who actually update the rosters and have a tournament with this thing still through to this day. So I think I would encourage people who are voting in this tournament to to go beyond the sports game stigma of 2016 and realize what an achievement Tecmo Super Bowl was, particularly because this was a Japanese-developed game, and they came up with a rock, paper, scissors play-calling system and game mechanics that were so fun that they really captured what football was all about. And I presume that the people who came up with this idea didn't have much exposure to football. I could be wrong, but I mean, I was under the impression that these were Japanese developers trying as hard as they could to represent American football, and they got it right, and arguably it was even more fun still than the early Madden games, even though those you kind of played for the camera angle, for the slightly bigger sprites, and for the realism. But even with that, my friends and I always went back to Tecmo Super Bowl. All right, enough of Tecmo Super Bowl. Shatterhand versus High Speed. Going to admit I am not that familiar with either game. I think I rented High Speed once, so I will just go with that. Battletoads versus Eliminator Boat Duel. Battletoads, for as hard as it was a constant rental for me in a game that always impressed, and a game that really pushed the NES. So I will have to go with Battletoads on that. Ninja Gaiden 3 versus Tiny Toon Adventures. I like Tiny Toon Adventures. I liked it particularly on the Genesis. But Ninja Gaiden 3, a very, very solid game. And that's a series that I rented a lot, so I will go with Ninja Gaiden 3. Game Boy, Metroid 2 versus Faceball 2000. I'm going to have to go with Metroid 2, obviously. Kid Icarus versus Ninja Turtles Back to the Sewers. Ninja Turtles Back to the Sewers was a very, very good, very convincing adaptation of the Ninja Turtles games for the Game Boy, but I always thought Kid Icarus was the better game, and there was something cool about, we're still in the day where, whoa, that was one of the big NES games, and now I'm playing it here on the Game Boy, so fonder memories of Kid Icarus. Now, I didn't realize that Mega Man Dr. Wily's Revenge came out in 91, so I had picked Operation C, but that Mega Man game is better and really starting a long line of very good Mega Man games, or maybe continuing that line. I'm not sure if Mega Man had come out on the Game Boy before that point. I want to say that it didn't, but either way, that's a very good game. Castlevania 2 versus Final Fantasy Adventure. Now, again, I thought it was Adventure 2, so that's what I was basing it on. Again, that was probably a Japanese release. I liked 2 and 3 of Final Fantasy Adventure. I'm not sure that I played... No, I know, I did play 1. And 1 is... Yeah, it was not as good as the last 2. Now I'm thinking about it, it hasn't aged well, whereas I think Castlevania has aged better, so I will go with that. Golden Axe Warrior, this is the wildcard bracket on the Master System, versus Castle of Illusion on the Game Gear. I did not play Golden Axe Warrior on the Master System. I want to say that was the RPG version of it. But I actually owned Castle of Illusion on the Game Gear, so I will go with that. Shinobi on the Game Gear versus Ninja Gaiden on the Atari Lynx. I'm going to go with Shinobi because I actually had that game as well. It's funny, I had a pretty good Game Gear collection back in the day, but I want to say that I gave it away, or I was trading them to friends, and I never got them back. But Shinobi was a game that I remember being very good, and I think it started, or it had a level where you're hopping like from car to car in traffic. There was a forest level. it did a lot of what Shinobi did on the Genesis, and did it pretty convincingly, pretty well on the Game Gear. So that's worthy of being in there. Now, next wildcard bracket, Sonic the Hedgehog on the Master System versus Sonic the Hedgehog on the Game Gear. And I've played both. I own the Game Gear game, and I've played Sonic, the Master System game, via emulation, but I honestly can't tell what the difference is. I thought they were the same game. I mean, I could be wrong, but I seem to recall they both started with the Green Hill Zone. They had this pink block Casino Night Zone. I want to say that these were in the same order. I could be wrong on that. Obviously, I'd love to have the North American copy of Sonic on the Master System, but since I own the Game Gear game, I will give it to Sonic on the Game Gear, and then Stun Runner on Atari and Out of This World on the Amiga. Now, Out of This World, I didn't play Stun Runner on the Atari. Like I said, because I like the art style of Out of This World, I will give it to that simply because I'm not really familiar with both games. So that is my ballot. I am going to submit it as we speak. And thanks for voting. So they're telling me here this round will be done on September 5th. So next week, you can go back and see what the results are and vote in round 2. And of course, I'll be on to comment about the picks if there are any upsets and move forward. So there's the round 1 of the 1991 video game tournament on the RetroLeague.com, and you don't even need to sign up for the Retro League forums to vote. Just go and vote. RetroLeague.com. So in the first half of the podcast, I reviewed King of Fighters 14, and of course I was pretty positive about that, but playing that game and enjoying that game has gotten me thinking about something that I've always had in the back of my mind, but I figure I may as well talk about now, and that is, you know, we're in this situation in gaming where I think a lot of these first-party or third-party AAA titles are fairly disappointing. And I wonder to what extent pushing the graphical envelope, pushing the online envelope, trying to innovate in a medium that feels in a lot of ways stuck. I wonder if the antidote to that is actually going back to the retro style of game. Now, it's a kind of a basic point. I know that lots of games attempt that. I mean, you have all the indie games that are retro-styled or retro-themed, and then you have first-party efforts from Nintendo, whether it's the new Kirby games, Kirby Triple Trouble, not the newest Kirby, but the one before that I thought was a great example of a game that did that, to say nothing of the Super Mario 3D Land and World franchise that has come up. But I'm talking about a broader trend. I mean, indie games, for their part, I think they just sort of riff on the retro styling just because it's easy to do, it's easy to program, and I think they're, in a lot of cases, aiming for very much a hipster retro crowd, and they just feel that needs to be their art style. I'm not talking about things like that. I'm talking about really going back to graphical styles and play mechanics that are just kind of easy to program, and that I think will, on the one hand, satiate a lot of the old school gamers who are upset by the various pushes online that don't always work out, or in the case of No Man's Sky, this kind of insane hype that isn't actually borne out in the in-game experience. So, what do I mean by that? Can I give a couple of examples? Well, I think King of Fighters 14 is a good example. It is a modern game. Like I said, it has the online stuff. It has a graphical style that you may or may not like, but that is fluid and I think reasonably captures these characters. So I didn't feel let down by it, as I mentioned. What else? I've always had this fantasy about an old school 16-bit style RPG that is unending and massive. So you think about the storage medium on a dual-layer Blu-ray disc as being, 50 gigabytes. I mean, could you imagine what kind of an RPG world you could create with 50 gigabytes? I mean, it could be one of the most massive old-school RPG adventures, and there are any number of predominantly Japanese publishers that would be able to make that happen. Of course, you could have an intricate fighting system, you could have a great, incredible story, you could have, you could cover multiple generations, you could have time travel elements, things like that, but it could be unendingly massive, and to say nothing of the ability to kind of download new lands and new episodes. So you wouldn't need to come up with a huge online system for that, as you could just deliver content online, you could deliver new missions online, but you wouldn't have to worry about programming multiplayer or anything like that. You wouldn't have to worry about coming up with insane art assets, although I know pixels are expensive to make these days. But if you look at iOS, I think there are those Tecmo Koei RPGs, a style like that. They churn them out all the time. But that style with an infinite kind of world, I think could go a long way. Sports games. Sports games, some would argue, are at a pinnacle. I would suggest they need to pare down, I've talked about this, I think, on one episode, pare down all the attempts at simulation and complexity and get back to producing a true sports video game. And then, of course, you have first-person shooters and things like that. And I think we have Doom, the most recent Doom game, which is a good example of you have a first-person shooter. It's technically advanced. It has the graphics, but its scope and its approach to the genre, very much being a kind of single-player exploratory experience, was a breath of fresh air. I'd like to see more of that. And I think it would save so much work, it would save so much disappointment on the part of the players, because I think retro design mixed with modern technology would just appeal to everyone. I think it would appeal to, like I said, it would appeal to, obviously, people in our age range, people who are listening to this broadcast. But I also think it would appeal to kids. I think the retro style, the retro game mechanics are such that it turned out, you obviously needed a long period of development in the medium, but I think going back to that would please a lot of younger people. I think the cell phone game, the sort of casual cell phone game market shows that not everything needs to be a 3D, high texture, high polygon count masterpiece to be beloved. And I also think it would be a nice reset. We can cut a lot of the fat out, cut a lot of the jargon out, and return to a time when gaming was just fun. I think we've kind of lost that element of fun. So I don't know that it's going to happen. I know it's going to sound anachronistic to a lot of people, but every game that has tried that, at least I have found more enjoyable than games that try to push the technical envelope but kind of lack the vision to be a full-fledged game. And I'm not sure that we need that disappointment moving forward. I think a lot can be accomplished by embracing our retro roots. Alright, welcome to This Month in Gaming, and I was going to stick to 1991 simply because a lot of the show was dedicated to that, and obviously with the Retro League tournament we're going to be talking a lot about 1991, but I couldn't find specific release dates. What I did find, however, was specific release dates for September of 1996. And September has always been a month with a lot of memories. First of all, I have a birthday in September, so I always got a new video game in September growing up. And then, of course, with the start of school, it's just one of those kind of nostalgic things you look back, or at least I look back on, going to school, getting this new game. And I picked 1996 because September of 1996 was my first semester in high school. And so many games had actually come out that month that I completely forgot about. I did not know that there were so many really sensational titles that came out. So it was a really great month of gaming. I don't actually know what I didn't get any of them, actually, because I didn't have the systems in some cases, where I just probably got something that was released in August. So, yeah, what came out in September? Well, September 9th started off with Crash Bandicoot. And, of course, the PS1. I'm not sure when the PS1... When did that come out in 96, or was it late 95? It was actually, no, it was a year before, September of 95. So September of 96, the second year game's coming out. And they start off with Crash Bandicoot, which was obviously the mascot of PlayStation, the early mascot. And it just symbolized that whole era to me. And it wasn't... I mean, even back then, I didn't think it was a great game, but it wasn't bad, and it did feel new and different and kind of a quirky character. So I didn't get that game right away. I believe, actually, I don't think I picked it up for another year or two. But it just felt like PlayStation and that era of PlayStation. So that would have been fun to play. Also, Virtua Fighter 3 came out in the arcades. I, at this point, was not going to arcades, but Virtua Fighter 3... I have seen a Virtua Fighter 3 arcade machine, and I'm always impressed by Virtua Fighter in the arcade. It's just, that's where it's meant to be. I didn't like the kind of terrain features and the sort of different levels of elevation in each stage. I don't think that really benefited the series, but it's a memorable game nonetheless. And then, of course, and I didn't realize this one, you had the first Persona game coming out for the PlayStation. For some reason, I thought Persona was very late in the lifespan of the PlayStation, but Persona Revelations was released, I believe, in sort of towards the end of September, and I've played it since. I've played it on the PSP, and it's just a wonderful game. So I could imagine, could you imagine getting Crash Bandicoot and Persona if you were a PlayStation guy back then? Very strong way to start your month. Now, of course, September also saw the release of Super Mario 64 and Pilot Wing 64. Obviously, I don't need to talk about how great Super Mario 64 was, but I did have a friend who, I think I mentioned before, he pre-ordered the N64 with Mario 64 and the Quest RPG. And I remember going over his house, probably late summer, because I think N64 came out in August, and then kind of like through the start of school on the weekends, going to his house and playing Super Mario 64. Tremendous memories. Some really good stuff. And then Street Fighter Alpha 2. Now, this is interesting. I have to check this because I have it listed as a September release for arcade, SNES, PlayStation, and Saturn, but something tells me that that is not accurate. So it was, where is September? Yeah, so this was a console release for the Saturn in September of 96, and really that, to me, is one of the best versions of the game, period, to this day. So I think, it was so strange. I sort of rhapsodized about the Saturn. I think Saturn owners at the time, and I was not one of them, didn't see that release as being as valuable a product to have as Super Mario 64. But yeah, in retrospect, a terrific game. And then we have Tobal #1, and that was famous because it had the Final Fantasy VII demo disc. And this was not a game that I played. I don't even remember the demo or anyone having this, but I would love to get my hands on this today. Unfortunately, I think it's rather expensive. I don't know that it's a great fighting game, but I think back then any sort of 3D fighter at home was significant. And then we ended, and actually, you know what? This is a game that I got. I misread this. I said Donkey Kong Country 2. It's actually Donkey Kong Land 2 on the Game Boy. And the Donkey Kong Land series on the Game Boy was quite good. And I can't remember if I actually... I definitely had this, and I still have it to this day. I don't know if I got it right on release. But it's pretty possible, because I did have the Game Boy at this point. I also had the SNES with the Super Game Boy. This is a Super Game Boy enabled game, so maybe this was the game that I bought with my birthday money. Really good series. Check it out if you haven't. I think it was a case that really surprised me, where the Game Boy captured so much of the gameplay. It had terrific music, and it kind of tried to have the same look as Donkey Kong Country, and I would say it pulled it off. It obviously wasn't really that sort of pre-rendered look, but it was close enough where I could say, hey, this is a reasonable approximation. And since I never owned any of the Donkey Kong Country games on the SNES, this was as good as I could have gotten at that time. And in fact, I played through it, I think, on a stream last year or the year before, and had a ball with it. So those were your September video game releases, and I'm trying to think of what I got. I may have spent my birthday money on that. I probably got Madden 97. Probably got Madden 97 with as a birthday gift. Now that I'm looking at these August releases, Yeah, that was probably what I what I went with. And got that. Did I have that for the... Yeah, I think I had that for the PlayStation. So, yeah, there you have it. September 1996. Certainly a worthy month and a historical month in the annals of video game history. One of the reasons why I switched to primarily a podcasting format is because I wanted to be able to come on here and kind of give some quick thoughts and analysis about things that I encounter in gaming without having to set up the camera and edit videos, only to ultimately create a kind of a podcast segment. So I'm going to put that to use tonight. I wasn't planning on recording anything. And I happened to just be sitting back, and I noticed as I was kind of going through my YouTube subscriptions that at the very bottom of the list of channels, I have this thing called Browse Channels, which perhaps is self-evident to everyone. I had just missed it. And so I noticed, you could see all the different categories, things that are popular on YouTube, and I happened to click on gaming. And what's telling me that there's 77.7, almost 0.8 million people with gaming-related subscriptions, and I'm going through them here, and kind of all the most popular, most trending videos in gaming, and I have to admit, this is unrecognizable to me. I have never done this. I have never sort of looked to see what the popular gaming content was on YouTube, because once you subscribe to the channels that interest you, I mean, for me, it's always been Happy Console Gamer, Spider1A, Pete Dorr when he was still making videos, now the Neo Turbo Maniac, John Hancock, and so on and so on. And so that kind of becomes your YouTube. You log in, and there's your retro gaming content, amongst other things that I look at. And so to me, gaming has always been about that small group of retro gamers. But as I scroll through, I'm seeing a hobby, I'm seeing an aspect of culture that I'm not a part of. And again, perhaps for you guys this is self-evident, but I just don't know what this is. I'm seeing lots of videos here with the what I call the quirky personality syndrome. Everyone is so random and so horrendously funny that they can just sort of go off topic and through a million different jump cuts. And of course, as we know, if you're actually editing a video, jump cuts can be a pain in the ass to do. So it's the very technical creation of a laid back and random personality for a number of these people. A lot of focus on just a couple games. I'm going through here. I'm seeing a lot of Minecraft, obviously. Now, I knew Minecraft was popular, but I didn't realize it was quite this popular. But people with 7 million, 14 million subscribers getting millions and millions of views per video for these games. Overwatch has crept up in here. Pokemon Go. I don't know if I said that already. No Man's Sky. And I'm looking around, and I don't know. I mean, is it always the flavor of the month? I mean, I think Minecraft is probably always up there. World of Warcraft. Not seeing a lot of Madden, but it's very weird. There's a lot of parodies, but kind of just really goofy parodies, like alternate theme songs to Pokemon. Sort of people playing around as Street Fighter. I mean, I'm only seeing one person here that I recognize, and that's Boogie2988. And I don't know, this is just hitting me. I'm feeling really old, and again, I apologize. This is kind of a stream of consciousness thing here, but I don't know that this is my hobby anymore. I almost wish that I hadn't done this. I kind of liked to just be in my own little realm of gaming content, but this kind of approach to gaming, these particular games, this particular self-presentation is alien and, quite frankly, very irritating. And I guess, I mean, I'm in my 30s now. I guess I should have known this, but this stuff has zero appeal to me, and it's just absolutely shocking to see the level of subscriptions that these people have. Well, I knew there was PewDiePie and stuff like that, or the AVGN, and not really fans of their stuff. I can't listen to the PewDiePie screaming. But I kind of thought they were on the top, and then you had people with 200, 300,000 subscribers. But I mean, I'm seeing multiple people with millions and millions of views and millions of subscribers producing a very different kind of content. I mean, they're kind of filming their distractions, like they're playing whatever game, and they're going off and giggling and being shocked and yelling. I guess that's from the PewDiePie thing about whatever's going on in Minecraft, and I guess they're kind of using it as a vehicle to just sort of present how quirky they are and how entertainingly they can react to various things. Very little in the way of analysis. Now, they may be very good at playing these games. I don't know. I've never played Pokemon Go. I've never played World of Warcraft. I've never played Minecraft, so I don't know what constitutes a rare Pokemon or a well-played game of Minecraft. So I'm not going to say anything about that, but yeah. I guess if you listen to a couple of these podcasts, whether it was episode 5, which I called A Millennial's Lament, particularly the last episode, kind of coming to the realization that this hobby, this identification that I've had as a gamer is no longer true. I think that, I mean, I hate to say this, and in a way, I never thought that I never really liked these distinctions, but I feel like I'm an adult who has an affinity for video games as opposed to a lifelong gamer. I don't know that I would want to stick to that, because I've never really believed that there should be kind of a firm, unbreakable distinction between your youth and your adulthood. Obviously, you mature and you have responsibilities and things like that, but I never felt that it was good to sort of renounce or repress or forget a lot of the joys of youth, even if you can't sort of relive them or recreate them. That you want to always have some sort of connection to your childhood. But as I look at the evolution of this, I think that while that might be true on a kind of abstract level for me, this has no connection to my life. This is not something that I'm interested in. And I mean, let me click around here. Maybe I'm I mean, this is a fairly depressing thing for me. So I guess I'm just talking into the microphone. I'm just constantly scrolling down and not seeing really anything in which to which I have any connection or in which I have any interest. We've got a guy here dressed up as the Witcher going down a slide. I guess maybe video games have become a kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, like a alternative comedy sort of thing. Like this is kind of like the D level or the C level of comedy. You know, you got the Bill Maher's of the world on the top, and then you've got people dressed as Street Fighter characters breaking into an old car for giggles. We've got a lot of cosplay people, and yeah, I guess I've been saying here that I think it's discovery is always hard on YouTube, but I kind of want to do my part to at least mention various people who deserve more attention, who deserve more recognition. And you know what? Maybe it's all for naught. If this is the kind of stuff that the mainstream hardcore gamer is into, then I really wonder where where retro gaming falls. Now, maybe the big retro gaming channels outside of AVGN, I take it that he is not as active as he used to be. Again, I never really cared for that channel, so I don't follow it. I know that Classic Game Room has kind of slowed down. I mean, still around, but slowed down a little bit. I don't know of another one that's really on the rise. Maybe, what are they called? Game Sack, Metal Jesus. Like, maybe they're making a play to kind of get to this level. You know, maybe there's a spot for retro gaming content as I sort of click down the big channels. Maybe you can get one channel in there. But I think, without naming names, I think if that is the case, you can see how the retro gaming content gets watered down. I mean, I'm not seeing a lot of depth to these videos. And, I mean, again, some are just gameplay. But you would think that if gameplay was particularly popular, that maybe there would be some retro stuff, and that would, even people who have sort of moved away from gaming, if they had a particular affinity for one game or another, they would sort of just watch it, 5-minute video here or there, but not really seeing any of that. So I think I'm gonna end my rant here and just put the question out there. You know, what do you guys think about this? You know, as listeners to this podcast and other retro gaming podcasts, you know, do you feel that, I'm not even going to say the industry, because I mean, I think based on what I'm seeing here, I mean, I actually think the video game industry caters to my interests better than this gaming culture that YouTube has given rise to. So do you guys feel a part of this mainstream culture? Is it not something you've considered, or am I happen to just wake up tonight and click on something I could have clicked on months ago and come to a realization that everyone has had before? I don't know. I think it is depressing, and I, for one, this is going to make me look very differently, I think, at my channel. I'm not saying I'm going away or anything, but it really puts things in perspective. And yeah, I've known it conceptually and intellectually. Now I'm sort of feeling it emotionally. Not a kid anymore. And there you have it, episode 10 of the Retro Critical Podcast, first episode for September. I'm not sure if I'm going to do another one. September, obviously, a long month, and this is coming out within the first week, but a fairly busy schedule this month. So we'll see where that goes. If you want to leave some questions, again, I always appreciate that. You can do so on the YouTube comments or send me a tweet. Twitter information is, as always, in the show notes, and I think user questions and comments really kind of boost the quality of the podcast. Similarly, like I said, I want to do some more interviews. I know some people like them, some people weren't crazy about them. I would love to get, I've talked about this quite a bit, but a friend of mine who is a massive baseball card collector and talk about the bubbles in collecting. I've been trying. I know I've mentioned his name a few times. I think it would be a really good interview. But let me know if there are other people out there that you would like to hear me interview and that I would have a shot to interview. I think probably I couldn't get an interview with Miyamoto, but I mean, if there's a YouTube person, YouTube host that you think would be a good fit, or someone that you know that would appreciate the interview style and want to do an hour in a substantive interview, send me their name. And so there we have it, episode 10. Thanks for listening.